The sinister Yogamont, shrouded in shadows and tentacles, screams an unknown name, filling the air with tension. Song Jinwoo, clutching his polearm, stands firm before the approaching threat, its power distorting space. Yoo Joonghyuk, exhausted and confused, realizes the gravity of the situation. It is getting catastrophically worse. A group of hunters, surrounded by deadly darkness, prepare for battle as Yogamont speaks his dread name again. Fear appears on Yoo Sang-ah's face, her lips parted in a silent scream that foreshadows something terrible. Song Jinwoo, clutching his weapon tightly, stares at Yoo Sang-ah as if warning her of impending danger. Yogamont, enraged by the disobedience, again hurls his words, distorted into strange sounds, including the incomprehensible mama. Yoo Sang-ah asks in confusion if her pronunciation is bad, while Yogamont shouts out, "K Lidu!" in a loud voice. Yogamont freezes in confusion, and the hunters carefully watch his reaction to the unknown but obviously important word. Jinwoo is surprised to note that Yoo Sang-ah has seemingly mastered the demonic translation skill, activating it at level 3. "So what is it about?" Yoo Sang-ah asks, and Jinwoo replies that Yogamont only repeats one phrase over and over again, "Become a mother." As Yogamont cries, "Kaelitu, Choi Jung," In cries out in despair, "Why, mother, I'm the father." One of Yogamont's purple tentacles writhes ominously, emitting a disgusting gurgling sound. The Yogamont begins to move, and a powerful burst of purple energy heralds the imminent attack. Jinwoo and Yoo Sang-ah, frozen in horror, only watch what is happening with wide eyes. That's what it meant, Jinwoo realizes, rushing forward as Yoo Sang-ah asks him if he even has a plan. Yogamont reveals his true nature. Demons are like parasites that need an intermediate host to continue their race, and his target was Choi Jung-in. Jinwoo rushes forward, his blade glowing with blue light as it slices through the tentacle, saving Choi Jung-in. Yogamont recoils in surprise as one of his tentacles is severed, but his cry of "Kalityu" continues. Master Song Jinwoo repels attacks with lightning speed, demonstrating unrivaled agility in combat. His gaze, full of determination, scans the battlefield, and a cry of warning cuts through the air. But Yogamont's response is not long in coming. A powerful wave of purple energy throws everyone back, shaking the very earth. The force of the blow is unimaginable, tearing apart stone and metal, leaving only chaos in its wake. Jinwoo feels this blow with his entire being, and even his body, accustomed to pain, trembles under the onslaught. "Damn, it's already broken," flashes through his thoughts when he realizes that his trusty blade couldn't withstand such power. He sees the giant figure of Yogamont and understands that there is no chance in open combat. A different approach is needed. But even in this desperate situation, Song Jinwoo believes that there will be a way out, and his voice echoes, "Tokebi, I know you're watching." In response to his call, a small horned creature appears out of thin air, and Jinwoo immediately gives the order to retrieve the package. Jinwoo only smirks, reminding him of the true state of affairs, and the displeasure of the Constellations threatens to fall upon little Tokaebi Beryu. A frightened Tokaebi, with a trembling voice, agrees, muttering that this time it might be interesting. The master rushes forward, and little Beryu, perched on his shoulder, watches as the earth crumbles under the hero's feet. Jinwoo hands Beryu a shining artifact, offering to auction it off at Tokaebi in exchange for broken faith. The system confirms receipt of broken faith, and Jinwoo's hand immediately begins to sparkle with blue lightning. From pure magical energy and electrical discharges, a new blade materializes in his hands, shining with an unearthly light. With a new weapon in hand, Master Song Jinwoo is ready to continue the fight, his resolve stronger than ever. He turns back to Yogamont, whose ominous figure and fluttering tentacles loom before him. Yogamont, with a devilish grin on his face, looks at his opponent, his eyes burning with an ominous fire. Beryu, watching Jinwoo, whispers challengingly, "Hee, you think you can fight with this? After all." His blade, nicknamed Broken Faith, although seemingly weak by classification, conceals within itself the potential for destruction. But Song Jinwoo, with an unperturbed expression, already knew about the fragility of his weapon, its wear and tear, and the impossibility of using it to its full potential. However, in his eyes, piercing and determined, one could see an unshakable will that was capable of surpassing any limitations. While Kargalgan grinned, anticipating an easy victory, Kaisel trembled with fear, sensing something bad. Kargalgan roared, his evil face distorted with rage, realizing that the enemy was not so simple. But Jinwoo just calmly ran through the options in his head, remembering how he had looked for ways to strengthen his faith and his abilities. The deadly blade once again gathered its destructive power, shining with a pure blue light. And then, with a cry of activation for the Sword of Faith, Shang Jinwoo rushed into battle, shrouded in an aura of fury and determination. Kargalgan responded with a powerful swing, his dark tentacles flaring up, trying to devour the hero. But Jinwoo didn't flinch. Gritting his teeth, he fixed his gaze on the target, not allowing fear to take hold of him. The swords crossed, and a blue flash of energy collided with Kargalgan's purple vortex, shaking the space. As Jinwoo retreated, he felt a searing pain as the ground opened up from the enemy's powerful blow, draining his mana at a terrifying rate. Each attack drained him, and he felt the precious mana draining from his body, leaving only fatigue. But Kargalgan gave no respite. His purple energy once again fell upon the hero, demanding his full concentration. Jinwoo dodged, creating a shield of pure energy around himself, eluding the deadly blow. And again, gathering his last strength, he rushed forward, his blade the last hope in this desperate battle. Suddenly, Jinwoo's body was illuminated by an emerald light, and the ghost of a mighty warrior appeared behind him. Weapon mastery had activated. Kargalgan, roaring furiously, tried to fight back, but his ancient strength was already beginning to fade. Jinwoo, having merged with the warrior's ghost, brought down a hail of powerful blows on the enemy, from which the very air rang. Each of his blows was calculated, aimed at weakening the enemy as if he had read his movements in advance. He knew that after a series of attacks, even such a powerful guardian could not help but show his vulnerability. The shadow warrior danced around the colossal figure of Kargalgan, looking for that decisive moment. And there it is. The weak spot has been discovered, an instant chink in the ancient monster's armor. The guardian gasped as pain shot through his ethereal body, unable to believe his secrets had been revealed. Yoo Joonghyuk, watching the battle, couldn't understand how Jinwoo could have predicted these moves. The other hunters, disconcerted by what they saw, wondered, how did he know all the tricks of this formidable creature? Jinwoo, ignoring their confusion, completed his combo, shaking the very foundation of the dungeon. Fatigue showed on his face, but the determination in his eyes did not weaken for a moment. He answered the unspoken question with only a short phrase, hiding behind it his true source of knowledge. The defeated Kargalgan lay motionless, and in Jinwoo's eyes was reflected the vicious gnashing of teeth of a certain black dragon of the abyss. At that moment, a sponsorship message came through, and the cute monster in the corner said the name of the rare blade in amazement. The monster, clearly surprised by the appearance of such an unusual hunter, began to ask questions, but Jinwoo was focused on the reward. The system's clicking notifications confirmed the receipt of the coins, completing the scenario. The sweet creature, which had once been a cruel guardian, now seemed to be fearfully awaiting its fate. Jinwoo, looking at the fallen guard, made a decision that would surprise many. He would not finish him off. His mercy seemed to attract the attention of some hidden schemers who watched him with a sly smile. Jinwoo, ignoring someone's impatience, focuses on the glowing creature that foretells an imminent trophy. But suddenly, a sharp realization flashes in his eyes as the Golden Guardian takes his last, dying breath. Meanwhile, another hunter, Choi Jung-in, shows no mercy as he finishes off his fallen enemy, leaving a trail of blood behind him. A triumphant smile plays on his face, full of insane pride in his own cruelty. His triumphant laughter echoes throughout the surrounding area, proclaiming a new, bloodthirsty force born from the death of others. Jinwoo, however, not sharing this bloodlust, only looks questioningly at Yoo Joonghyuk while the system records the impossible achievement. Choi Jung-in continues to mock, basking in the glow of his fleeting glory, unaware that his recklessness has already attracted the attention of an ancient evil. System windows opened up before him, giving him access to information and, possibly, new power. Jinwoo, shocked by the unexpected message, tries to explain the essence of what is happening to his companions. That's why I let him live, Jinwoo explains calmly, revealing the subtleties of the connection between monsters and their demonic overlords. But at that moment, Choi Jung-in, lying on the ground, begins to transform, enveloped in a mysterious purple light. The hidden schemers, watching Jinwoo, admire his immoral decision, seeing in it the perfect scenario for their star stream. A small, mysterious smile appears on Jinwoo's face, as if he is fully aware of the hidden game and his role in it. Deep in the cave, shrouded in a mystical glow, a holographic treasure chest awaits its time. Choi Jung-in, meanwhile, wanders through the shadowy wilderness, his face reflecting anxiety and confusion. I found it, Baek Mi-ho says, holding up a modest bracelet, while Yoo Joonghyuk clutches the magical shield tightly. I thought there would be something better, Baek Mi-ho says disappointedly, unaware that the most valuable trophies have already gone to someone else. It doesn't matter. The important thing is that the most important thing awaits us inside, Jinwoo declares, looking at the mysterious glowing structure. His hand touches the glowing surface, and the energy contained within it responds with a powerful resonance. A true treasure opens before them. The magic furnace, a powerful artifact that can only be possessed once. The artifact appears before them, a shimmering, mysterious box, and Dokja already senses its hidden power, while his companions only look questioningly. A mystical blue flame erupts from the depths of the magic furnace, transforming raw prey into a juicy, mouth-watering treat that exudes an unearthly aroma. Hong Hee-won and Kil-young's hungry eyes stare greedily at the giant piece, and Dokja, without hesitation, declares that he will be the first to touch this gift. The first, greedy bite tears the flesh, and a wave of incredible taste overwhelms the hero, dissolving fatigue and anxiety. Dakshi's companions gather around him, watching him with sparkling anticipation as he devours every bite with undisguised pleasure. A satisfied smile plays on his face as he holds a huge portion in his hands, and even the most exquisite feast pales in comparison to this moment. The magic oven continues to work its magic, creating a treat for everyone, and even invisible entities from distant worlds cannot contain their greed. Savoring every bite, Dokja reflects on how the world of his favorite novels comes to life beyond all expectations, and Kil-jung is immersed in pure pleasure. Even the adamant Yoo Joonghyuk, who usually hides his emotions, can't help but feel an instinctive desire when looking at this unearthly delicacy. Dokja, condescendingly offering a treat, hands a piece of meat to Yoo Joonghyuk, who, unexpectedly for everyone, accepts it with sincere gratitude. A rare smile appears on his face, but behind it lies not only satiety, but also a deep, cold calculation. Under the vaults of an ancient tree, illuminated by the soft light of the magic furnace and the mystical glow of the chest, they find temporary shelter and peace. Hong Hee-won doesn't hide her admiration, asking Dokja how he manages to solve mysteries that remain inaccessible to others. She admits that Dokja has an incredible wealth of knowledge from the novels he has read, while she only benefits from the fruits of his extraordinary mind. The mysterious blue box, shimmering in the dim light, brought them no direct benefit, but became the key to the deeper secrets of this world. Despite his misgivings, Hong Hee-won resolutely urges Dokja to open the chest, convincing him that no one else is more worthy of this treasure than he is. Confusion can be seen on the faces of his comrades, who do not understand the full depth of the events that have occurred in these moments. Yoo Jin-ho feels a chill down his spine. Something incredible has already happened, and something even more terrible awaits them ahead. Dokja, lost in his thoughts, seems to already see the next step that should change their fate. He turns to Park Kyung-hye, asking about Gil-young, as if seeking confirmation that it is possible to resort to the child's help. The monster's eyes silently scan the surroundings, and its jaws foretell imminent destruction. It is Baekhyun, a sweet yet powerful creature, breaking through the streams of golden magic, who greets them with a sly grin as if they were long familiar friends. Meanwhile, the corridor they were walking along seemed to lose its mystery, turning into an ordinary but long underground tunnel with rails. Yoo Jin-ho devours the huge leg of meat with gusto, encouraged by Sung Jin-woo, who offers him a source of much-needed energy to restore his strength. Sung Jin-woo approaches Baekhyun suspiciously, asking if he's done anything wrong again while he's been away, and the little monster just blinks innocently. Baekhyun just blinks innocently as Sung Jin-woo explains that only he can hear the little demon's true thoughts, hinting at some kind of takibi ability. The group continues on its way down the tracks, and the conversation becomes more serious, with Baekhyun admitting that his willfulness and prolonged promotional campaigns have led to problems. Yoo Jin-ho jealously asks about his share, but Sung Jin-woo is adamant, declaring that the sword will remain with him, offering the rest of his belongings for coins. After the distribution of the spoils, where Song Jin-woo showed unprecedented generosity, a strange anticipation hung in the air. Song Jin-woo feels the weight of all these gazes on him, knowing that any choice he makes will be a death sentence. To refuse would be to become a monster in the eyes of these people, but the price of salvation may be too high. Over all this chaos hangs the title of the first scenario, Original Sin, foreshadowing a choice that will determine the fate of many. The playful voice of the system, in the person of the creature, mockingly declares that there are only 10 minutes left until the end, heating up the tension. At this critical moment, when every breath he takes could change the world, Song Jin-woo's choice is closely watched by the Constellations. A cold, calculating light flashed in his eyes, foreshadowing the inevitable decision. The crowd, gripped by panic and greed, questioned him, not realizing that their requests only delayed salvation. Fear distorted their faces, revealing the base instincts of those trapped. The realization that there was no turning back grew stronger in Song Jinwoo's chest. Amid the whispers of despair, a sinister laugh was heard, anticipating a fall. Accusations rained down from all sides, but Song Jinwoo only watched from a distance as morality crumbled. The growing fury of the crowd, blinded by self-interest, turned into a menacing roar. Even those who tried to hold back the crowd were soon silenced by threats, and the cunning manipulator gave his final advice. But Song Jinwoo, as if challenging fate, only asked his question calmly. The division became clear, he and those who believed in him, against the masses driven mad by greed. And then a barely audible step was heard, marking the beginning of a bloody drama. Maddened by greed, they rushed forward, ready to tear apart anyone who stood in their way. His eyes, deep and penetrating, saw through the veil of lies, penetrating into the darkest corners of their souls. That's when the first cracks in their fragile union began to appear, as each rushed to deny the other's guilt. But the hero mercilessly tore off the masks, accusing them of cowardice, of unwillingness to accept their own role in his tragedy. They greedily pursued coins and power, without thinking about the price they would have to pay. Now that everything was clear, their faces twisted into grimaces of shame and disgust. But it was too late. The horrifying truth has been revealed. These players have gone too far, driven by greed and lust for power, deaf to pleas for mercy. Disbelief and denial clashed as the brutal reality of Choi Jung-in's betrayal became undeniable, echoing in desperate cries. Time melted away, counted down by the chilling laughter of their tormentor, and despair grew in the confined space. The crowd froze in horror and insight as the name Yoo Joonghyuk was whispered to each other, poisoned by the bitterness of betrayal. With the last of their strength, overcome with righteous anger, someone issued a challenge, calling on them to fight to the end if there was even a drop of pride left. But Chu Chanin only smiled wryly, while the higher powers, the constellations of absolute good, had already pronounced his verdict, villain. Suddenly, a sharp sound pierced the silence, a decisive step that marked the beginning of a new phase of this deadly game. And so, amidst the chaos and shadows, Song Jinwoo appeared, radiating a chilling calm and silent determination. The harsh, unforgiving reality of the world they lived in crashed down on them, demanding an immediate choice. Then a storm of desperate, furious battle broke out as the cornered survivors turned their weapons against their tormentors. Blood stained the floor, innocent screams mingled with furious calls to hold on, even in the face of imminent death. Even the most unprepared found unprecedented strength in fighting back against the wave of senseless cruelty. The former victims, now allies, stood firm, clutching improvised weapons, ready to make a last stand. But it was Song Jinwoo who rushed through the carnage, the blue glow and the deadly precision of his movements. His eyes, sharp as blades, burned with indomitable determination, a silent roar echoing his dark will. Behind him lay fallen enemies, their terror giving way to awe before his all-consuming power, a beacon of hope in the darkness. A swift, merciless blow found its target, silencing yet another aggressor forever. There was no mercy, only swift retribution, inflicted with an ethereal weapon that pierced flesh and bone. "I told you I would finish you all," whispered one of the survivors, her patience running out, turning to pure rage. And then the real hunt began, where the victims turned into predators, caught in a whirlwind of destructive force. But within this chaos, one soul, tormented and broken, was preparing to be reborn into something else. Her eyes, previously filled with despair, now glowed with a furious red light, reflecting boundless determination. And above her, like a heavenly sentence, a huge sword materialized, marking her transition from victim to punishing force. That look, full of fierce will, foreshadowed an inevitable storm for those who dared to underestimate her. "Step back a bit," said a familiar voice, full of hidden power, as if acknowledging the coming changes. "You have made a great contribution to the development of the little man attribute." "These people," one of the defenders growled, clutching a bat in his hands, his anger almost palpable. And she just grinned, accepting her fate, my concern. "The character Jung Hee-1 is ready to become your sword." With her eyes closed, she absorbed the new strength, and even her ally standing next to her could not hide his amazement. Red energy swirled around her, filling every cell of her body with burning power. She stood up, surrounded by glowing chains, her posture radiating not only menace but also absolute confidence in her new abilities. And then the heavens, in the person of the constellations of absolute good, looked with approval at her transformation. The time of justice had come, the ancient scales had quickly tipped downwards, and the verdict had been pronounced. The first blow hit the enemy with crushing force, causing him to fly back like a puppet. Damn, she wasn't that strong, flashed through his head as he felt the growing pain and the incredible power of her blow. His face was distorted with horror and disbelief. Ah! He screamed, trying to comprehend what was happening. In his wide eyes, there was only pure, animal fear of the one who seemed to him an ordinary victim. Jung Shi-1 was burning like a bright flame, her hair fluttering, engulfed in a red aura of power. She moved like a fury, her blows tearing apart space, turning her opponents into ashes. Each of her swings was filled with fury and determination, crashing down on her enemies with merciless force. The sword of justice flashed in her hands, piercing one of her opponents, and this blow was only the beginning of a new, deadly hunt. With each new swing of her improvised weapon, the bloody dance of death flared up ever brighter. In the center of the chaos stood Song Jinwoo, his face impassive, and in his hands rested a reliable, albeit broken, blade. The tragedy unfolded around him, the wounded and the dead, and every look was full of pain and despair. Tears of grief mixed with blood on Park Kyung-hae's cheeks as she mourned those who fell in that brutal massacre. The deadly edge of the blade, stained with someone else's blood, stood menacingly near her face. But even in her desperate situation, Baek Miho managed to find the strength to strike back, knocking down her attacker. Two bodies remained lying on the bloody floor, but the threat had not disappeared. It had only taken on a new form. At that moment, their eyes met, two survivors, each with a glimmer of unbroken will in their eyes. One of the attackers, with a grin of superiority, watched them from above, confident of his victory. But his smug smile quickly turned into a grimace of horror as the deadly beam pierced his body. This was Baek Miho's final, decisive blow, unleashing all his pent-up fury on the enemy. On the floor of the metro station, drowning in crimson stains, the last echoes of the massacre were dying out, and above all this, an ominous system message appeared. Park Kyung-hae's cry of despair broke the silence, heralding new trials that would chill the blood in his veins. And the few who survived could only look in horror at the bloody rain, not understanding its nature. Amidst the dead bodies and scarlet puddles, Baek Miho sank to her knees, exhausted but not broken. Her face, stained with blood and dust, reflected the incredible tension of the past battle. Then, with unperturbed calm, Song Jinwoo extended a helping hand to her, acknowledging her strength and resilience. His words, which sounded like both a sentence and a promise, announced, "This is only the beginning." Their hands, meeting in a strong handshake, became a symbol of a new, forced union. At that moment, the true nature of their test was revealed. The system announced a life tax, demanding 100 coins every midnight. The blood on the signs at Yaksu Station testified to a recent massacre that left no hope for an easy outcome. A new dawn was breaking over the city, but its light only emphasized the alien shimmer of magical particles in the air. Broken glass and a lone sneaker stained red spoke of chaos, and a desperate escape cut short by someone's death. "Guys!" The echo of a desperate cry carried across the empty, bloody platform, calling out to those who might no longer answer. The group of survivors faced a difficult choice. "You really don't want to join us?" came the question, calling for unity. Others, with a detached smile, preferred to go their own way, claiming that they had enough coins and strength to survive on their own. There was a mixture of fatigue and self-confidence in their eyes. After last night, they believed that they could handle everything themselves. "So, are we heading out?" someone asked, and there was no need to ask if Hee-won would come with them. It was obvious to everyone that the punishing judge was following them. With determination in their eyes, they moved forward, the protagonist in the lead, ready for a new challenge, to the next location. An unexpected gesture, a light punch to the shoulder, a symbol of trust growing stronger in the whirlpool of shared danger. And then, a cold notification from the system. The character Jung Hee-won has transferred a 500 coins to you, interrupting the moment. An embarrassed Hee-won explained that she couldn't take it all for herself, but shared it with anyone who needed it. The protagonist silently considered, after all, the lion's share of these coins had come to him one way or another. "I wouldn't share if I were you," he said, to which Hee-won only laughed. "It's a good thing I'm not you." He mentally asked her to stop smirking, since most of the coins ended up in his pocket anyway. "Looks like I can't get out of this." The protagonist sighed, looking at his account, 23,050 coins, and next to him, the ever-present monster. This scenario was perfect for attracting the attention of the Constellations and increasing his influence, he thought. His strategy was taking shape. Suddenly, a loud system sound was heard, and blue screens appeared in front of each of them. Second main scenario received. "The first shelter? What does that mean?" one of the companions asked anxiously as the new conditions presented themselves to them. The next location indicated on the map turned out to be Chonmoro Station, the new destination in this deadly marathon. However, the path to Chunmuro turned out to be not just difficult, but grueling, full of fierce battles. Exhaustion became their only companion. Every step was difficult, every breath a struggle against the relentless hordes of monsters. The tunnels were teeming with vile earth rat-dogs, forcing the group into grueling skirmishes that drained the last bits of their strength. Every turn held a potential threat, every shadow a lurking danger, keeping their senses on constant alert. Arriving at the seemingly abandoned station, they wondered if the hastily fled residents had left anything useful behind. One of them voiced the grim truth. In their current state, they might not even reach Chunmuro. The path they had just passed was littered with the fallen, victims of those same monstrous rats, or perhaps something far more sinister. Despite their fatigue, the most capable of them, a former soldier, suggested going in search of supplies. The women hesitated, an unspoken unease running through them. He walked away, leaving them to wonder about his intentions. Amid the tension, there was an awkward exchange of words about the most basic human needs until their leader decided to separate. The call of nature, a stark reminder of their humanity amidst the surreal ordeal, led some to the restrooms. But as soon as they turned around, a new question arose, and a shadow of confusion darkened their faces. Where did their comrade go, the one who volunteered to look for supplies? He climbed up, a choice that instantly ignited a spark of fear in K.Y. Young. Far above, shrouded in an ominous purple haze, lurked a deadly poison, toxic fog. Yet their leader pressed forward, a lone figure pushing through the dangerous shroud. The chilling system message confirmed the danger. The toxic fog was taking its toll. He ignored it and became lost in his memories, trying to find the right route from Dongguk University Station. A flash of realization, a wave of grim determination, crossed his determined gaze as he made his way along the treacherous road. A sudden flash of insight, a spark of recognition, ignited within him. High on the pedestal stood a statue, preserving ancient peace and grandeur. The lonely figure of Dokji stood before the monument of the great monk Yoo Joonghyuk, his gaze concealing a deep meaning. With determination in every step, he headed away, as if following an invisible call. Nearby, two travelers stood frozen in amazement, their faces distorted with disbelief. In response to their silent question, Dokja merely pressed his hands together in a semblance of prayer, which only increased their confusion. In his eyes, however, there burned not the fire of faith, but a calculating gleam. Even the tiny furry creature watching him sensed something was wrong, its small brain struggling to comprehend what was happening. A sudden burst of energy shattered the silence, heralding the inevitable. Dokja darted forward, his movements quick and precise, leaving only a shimmering trail behind him. Screaming in terror, the little creature watched as the blue blade pierced the air, aiming for something more than just a stone. A crushing blow fell upon the statue, tearing it apart as a shocked Bihun cried out in horror to Dokja. The echo of his despair echoed through the empty halls, questioning the hero's sanity and his insane act. But Dokja, ignoring Bihun's panic, sat calmly by the fire, roasting his trophy. The fragments of the ancient idol were scattered around, testifying to the destruction it had brought to this world. The little creature stared in shock at the aftermath, unable to believe what he saw. "What's that noise?" flashed through Dokji's mind as he serenely took a bite of his food. His plan was far deeper than simple vandalism. It was part of an ancient, daring procedure of breaking the seal, even if it seemed reckless. Baehyun, in complete indignation, exclaimed about the disrespect for the national hero, but his words simply did not reach Dokja. Meanwhile, other companions, running up to Dokja, were interested in his ritual and the temple where he was, completely unaware of the true scale of his deeds. Bayek Miho, full of determination, announced that she had something important for them, attracting everyone's attention. She then pointed to the station number, hinting at their next destination. She held up the nondescript rags, skeptically asking Dokja if it was really the cool item he was talking about. A murmur of bewilderment arose all around. Who was this monk of the Four Seas whom they had never heard of? But then Song Suho exclaimed joyfully, recognizing the monk's name, recalling it from her history lessons. And as she shared details about the great Joseon monk who fought for his homeland, Dokja watched as the rag-clad Constellation showed touching interest in her story. Their doubts vanished as they felt the undeniable power emanating from these objects, which strengthened their faith in Dokja's words. Dokja, with a shameless smile, continued his story, claiming that these artifacts had descended from heaven in answer to his prayer at the monument to the great monk. He skillfully played on their emotions, calling on them to accept the monk's legacy and unite to save their country, as the ancient hero had done. His eloquence amazed even the tattered Constellation, who seemed to sense the sincerity of his call. In the end, the group, having experienced so many incredible things, was ready to believe in any legend, because in this new world even a great monk could become a constellation. Baek Miho thoughtfully recited the name of the Four Seas monk, realizing that his legend could be quite useful as long as the bald general watched and generously sponsored. Dache urged everyone to prepare themselves as they were approaching Chunmuro, thanks to a certain "not my contact" that helped them avoid the dangerous rat dogs. But it was too early to relax, because Dokje warned there was only a kilometer left to the station and something was bound to appear. Suddenly his voice sounded like thunder, calling everyone to retreat back immediately. Glowing vortices enveloped the space as they retreated, and the question of the nature of the coming test hung in the air. Surprise and fear were reflected on the companions' faces when they found themselves in the epicenter of an inexplicable whirlwind. Baek Miho seemed to lose her balance, her face contorted with nausea, as if the space itself was turning her inside out. The world around her distorted and her mouth opened in a silent scream, reflecting her inner turmoil. His eyes, wide with horror and pain, took in the distorted world, causing his head to spin with mounting agony. He himself felt a strange distortion of reality. An unknown force made his insides tremble, and in panic he searched for the presence of the one who was nearby. An invisible entity, woven from chaos, tried to touch his face as his hand tightened its grip on the hilt of his trusty blade. Sweat trickled down his temple, but through the excruciating pain he felt something ancient and powerful stir deep within, responding to the call. The air around him crackled, and the ground shook with the onslaught of electrical discharges, marking the birth of a new, blinding force. Shadows darted around him, cries of "calm down" echoed in the heated air as the constellation Hidden Schemer watched in awe at his unbending will. And in those wide-open eyes was reflected not only pain, but also the frightening clarity of a newborn force that was bursting to get out. His own cry of despair, unlate, mixed with a plea for forgiveness, "Mommy, forgive me," shattering the fragile balance of his awakened soul. His very soul, shattered by grief, began to be reforged, taking on a new, frightening form. In the throes of rebirth, he saw Yusana, clutching the mystical Four Seas rosary, desperately trying to become a shield, protecting those dear to him from the encroaching darkness. He finally embraced his new power, declaring his intention to tear apart the very fabric of reality that had become a trap for them. The reason for his mad act was revealed. The ancient skill that granted freedom from any illusory shackles was now at his disposal. He stood on the threshold of an unprecedented transformation, every cell of his body pulsing with anticipation and pain, shrouded in an ominous glow. And then, in the abyss of his pupils, a pure, incinerating light flashed, piercing the darkness and foreshadowing the coming cataclysm. A wave of pure energy erupted from the depths of his being, tearing apart space and time, shaking the very foundation of their imprisonment. The world around him, created as an illusory prison, began to crumble into dust, revealing the true, frightening emptiness behind it. But even through this chaos and destruction, an invisible thread, a promise or an oath, held him tightly, preventing him from being consumed by madness. Yet even his monstrous strength was not enough to overcome all. He fell, while those whose hearts were filled with unquenchable devotion continued to fight around him. In that moment of despair, Yoo Joonghyuk, driven mad by fear, screamed the names of those he was losing, trying to protect with his own fragile life. And even as darkness fell, the leader's voice, full of pain and determination, cut through the panic, calling for a final, desperate act of resistance. A giant shadow loomed over them, and each of them felt the cold breath of death penetrating to the very bones. Song Jinwoo's gaze, filled with horror and determination, captured every movement of this unthinkable threat. Jung Hee-won's frail figure rushed into battle, brandishing an improvised weapon, while Park Kyung-hee stood frozen in terror. But the one who fought had changed, her eyes turned red, and an ominous voice promised death to anyone who stood in her way. The transformed Jeon Hee-won struck with inhuman strength. Her movements became abrupt, and her gaze became frighteningly empty. And just like that, new enemies emerged from the darkness, mysterious, ghostly specters, shrouded in a purple aura, heralding a fierce battle. One of the companions, Lee Hyun-sung, lay exhausted, his body shaking from exhaustion and the horror he had experienced. Suddenly he woke up, his scream breaking the silence, and in Lee Hyun-sung's voice there was despair and pain from helplessness. Those around him watched with relief as Lee Hyun-sung came to his senses, wondering what exactly had happened. Song Jinwoo showed him the Spectre Spiritual Stone, explaining that the monsters were defeated while he was unconscious. Yu Sana only smiled at his surprise, confirming that the battle had ended while he was lost in nightmares. Song Jinwoo added that the specters specialized in mental attacks, and therefore their victory was not as easy as it seemed. He again expressed his gratitude to Dokja Shi, whose help had proven invaluable against such a dangerous enemy, and she modestly waved off the praise. Suddenly, Lee Hun-sung staggered, his vision became cloudy again, and the memories of the horror he had experienced returned with renewed vigor. Song Jinwoo understood that even though his body had been saved, Lee Hun-sung's mind was still in the grip of the nightmare imposed by the specters. Scenes from the past, where he, as a little boy, begged his mother for forgiveness, played through his mind like a broken record. Song Jinwoo, seeing his suffering, extended his hand, as if trying to protect him from the invisible shadows of the past and present. The gesture was a promise that no one would be left alone in the face of such horror, and Song Jinwoo hugged Lee Hyun-sung tightly, sharing his pain. Still trembling in the tight embrace, Lee Hun-sung was unable to escape from the captivity of his nightmares, his consciousness wandering in the darkness. While studying the system data, Song Jinwoo noted that her real story was different from the one described in the novel. It was Lee Ji-hai, nicknamed the Navy Admiral, an ordinary high school girl whose fate was closely intertwined with Yoo Joonghyuk. Lowering her sword, the girl confidently said that she would show them the way to the station, and resolutely led them deeper into the corridor. A new goal was reflected in Song Jinwoo's shining eyes, and he followed it without hesitating in the face of the unknown. And so, the group moved forward, led by the young warrior, and Song Jinwoo continued to carry Lee Hyun-sung, carrying within him the promise of protection. Chunmoro Metro is the heart of a new danger, where destinies intersect and trials begin. In those eyes, one could see determination, a readiness to meet any threat that this world conceals. Step by step, they entered what the system called the safe zone, but the truth was often hidden behind such promises. Yoo Jin-ho felt the air around him thicken, foreshadowing the hidden anxiety that hung in this place. Song Jinwoo, with his usual insight, noted the activation of a new channel, confirming his suspicions about the presence of other Tokaibi on Chunmoro. But it wasn't only the monsters that could pose a threat. The laughter coming from afar carried with it a premonition of a different, human danger. The local inhabitants, already entrenched here, welcomed the new companions, but this greeting was laced with hidden threat and greed. One of them, having succumbed to the intoxication of alcohol, cynically justified his inaction, declaring that in such a world there is nothing but drink. Their gazes, full of greed, slid over the new arrivals, assessing what they could profit from, especially appreciating their new coins. Her dark eyes focused on an invisible target, reflecting an internal struggle and a readiness to act. After ordering the young man Suho to keep an eye on the strangers, Park Kyung-hee resolutely walked away, leaving behind only vague rumors about the master's friends. Still not fully understanding what was happening, the young man recoiled in fear, letting her go ahead. Embarrassment mixed with unexpected joy on Song Suho's face as the stranger's attention fell on him. Sparks of excitement surrounded Sun Suho as he tried to explain the situation to Sun Jinwoo's companions, who was watching everything calmly. Yoo Jin-ho, always prepared for the unexpected, smiled, infected by the young man's sincere enthusiasm. Corridors full of numbered doors held the secrets of their temporary refuge, where these strange events unfolded. Meanwhile, somewhere deep in these corridors, Park Kyung-hye and her companion discussed the details of their situation, their faces clouded with worry. A heavy fatigue was making itself felt, causing one of those waiting to yawn, trying to drive away sleep. Song Jinwoo continued his questioning with a serious expression, gradually putting together pieces of information. 3 days ago, they were saved by a certain Yoo Joonghyuk. That's how Song Jinwoo voiced his version of events, demanding confirmation. The young man, Song Suho, nervously scratched the back of his head, unable to refute Song Jinwoo's words, although the truth was much more complex. One of the companions raised his hand indignantly, pointing out the injustice they were forced to endure. Yoo Jin-ho carefully wrote down every word, while Song Jinwoo was puzzled as to why these bureaucratic procedures were necessary in such a situation. The information about the landlord union shocked Song Jinwoo, causing him to think about new rules for survival in this world. And here they are, representatives of that very union of landlords, ordinary-looking men whose power here was unquestionable. While his group members tried to communicate politely, Song Jinwoo sensed a subtle thread of threat in the words of these landlords. The old man from the landlords' union, whose back remained impenetrable, spoke of survival with ease, as if it were second nature to him. And there it was, a mysterious green glow appeared on the floor, the green zone, surrounded by the shadows of the struggle. Desperate silhouettes of those fighting broke through the semi-darkness, and a mysterious space appeared before them, designated as a room. People passed by, not paying attention to the ominous glow, but for those who arrived, this was only confirmation. Here, these areas were called rooms. The faces of the newcomers reflected anxiety, because each step they took plunged deeper into the unknown, promising the imminent revelation of all secrets. Now the zones began to appear everywhere. Green Zone 3-3 clearly demonstrated that the landlord's power extended over entire levels. Yoo Jin-ho wondered why Yoo Joonghyuk, who was known for his strength, remained aloof from this chaos. The answer was simple and cruel. The satyr believed that everyone should stand on their own feet without anyone's help. As he thought about it, Yoo Jin-ho realized that this kind of detachment was quite in keeping with Yoo Joonghyuk's nature, and he probably wasn't calling for them to follow him. The brazen demand for coins sounded like a death sentence, completely depriving him of any hope of leniency. And again the ominous gleam of the charge in the barrels of the tower foreshadowed a new wave of agony. But among the indifferent faces there were also those who could not come to terms with the injustice, trying to appeal to the remnants of humanity. The man turned to his companion with alarm in his voice, realizing the growing threat of what was happening. But the main instigator's gaze was cold and unyielding, not allowing for objections. He just chuckled, mockingly asking if this hero had been too hasty in taking on unnecessary responsibility. The offer to atone for someone else's guilt became a direct challenge, a trap from which it was difficult to escape. Thoughts of the monstrous price for a fleeting mistake flashed through his head, realizing that in front of him were not just bandits but real predators. Taking a deep breath, he turned decisively towards the exit, but this turn was not an escape, but only a preparation. There was something more than anger reflected in his eyes, a cold determination that foreshadowed a quick retribution for every tear and humiliation. The shadow loomed, taking the form of 10 main antagonists whose names and order changed with each new regression, but their evil essence remained unchanged. He stood on the threshold of the Green Zone, 56 out of 70, an oasis of safety whose apparent tranquility only underscored the insidiousness of the hidden dangers. In front of him stood a line of tough guys with baseball bats, demanding tolls, turning the public space into their personal domain. "Okay, I'll pay," he said calmly, as if each word was being weighed on an invisible scale, but then he added that he wanted to meet Kong Pil-do. A system window hovered over the insolent man, revealing his name, Kim Jin-chul, 49 years old, owner of the Dirty Bastards, private landlord. For a moment, confusion appeared on the henchmen's faces as the hero, without waiting for an answer, took out his phone, demanding Kong Pil-do. Tension filled the air as one of the red laser turrets activated, preparing to spit out a deadly beam. Kim Jin-chul, confused by such impudence, did not have time to react when a laser flash cut through the space. However, the hero had already stepped forward, leaving behind the frightened minions and their useless threats, his gaze riveted on another target. A man sitting to the side, calmly turning the pages of a magazine, said, "One more step." His voice was quiet but authoritative. It was him, Kong Pil-do, dressed in a stylish suit, with a bald head and a smug smile, the ruler of this zone, absorbed in reading. "This is our first time meeting, but you will require special treatment." These words, spoken by Kong Pil-do, sounded like a sentence hidden behind polite arrogance. The hero just chuckled, wondering if he should pay the fine and interact with the pawns as a notification popped up above him. "The character, Kong Pil-do, is interested in you." Kong Pil-do, intrigued by such audacity, bowed his head, his grin widening, acknowledging the newcomer's unexpected boldness. "So what's your reason for coming? It doesn't seem like paying the fine is your only goal," the hero said calmly, looking shrewdly into his eyes. The silence between them was filled with unspoken challenges, each assessing the other's strength and intentions, and the tension grew. "I advise you not to act rashly, boy," Kong Pil-do's warning tone sounded, but the hero's hand had already slid to the hilt of the sword. The terrified henchmen, frozen in place, watched the scene, realizing that they had witnessed the beginning of an inevitable clash. The tension was mounting, and Kong Pil-do's entourage stood in silent anticipation, feeling the weight of the moment. The young man, maintaining an outward calm, was merely considering his next steps. Meanwhile, Kong Pil-do watched him with a sly grin, anticipating how things would turn out. "Calm down," the hero said confidently, explaining that he was only looking for the owner of the building, and everyone understood what that meant. Having declared his need for refuge in the Green Zone, he was met with refusal until he offered something more valuable. Kong Pil-do's eyes lit up when the young man mentioned some information that was worth more than any coin. The name that escaped the hero's lips echoed in the bandit's mind, causing shock and disbelief. Yoo Joonghyuk. The entire company was alarmed, demanding an explanation until the hero confirmed his connection with the legendary troublemaker. A moment of silence, as if hanging in the air, preceded the next wave of questioning. "What is your connection?" Kong Pil-du asked menacingly, demanding the truth. The answer was laconic and honest. "They are comrades who have gone through the most deadly trials." Kong Pil-du doubted it, but the hero insisted on his friendship, emphasizing their unbreakable bond. His eyes were filled with calculations, like a digital stream weighing the risks and rewards, anticipating potential gains. After activating his unique skill, profit and loss calculation, Kung Pil-du still hesitated, trying to predict his opponent's move. "Don't underestimate me," came the warning voice of a young man with a hidden power. Is he overthinking things, or does the hero simply see through his superficial assessments? At that moment, he appeared in all his majesty, his eyes shining with an icy light, and the surrounding aura foreshadowed an approaching storm. And, like an echo, a sharp farewell sounded, cutting through the dead silence of the abandoned metro station. With a beaming smile full of hidden meaning, the newcomer cheerfully threw out a phrase about the value of a good companion, leaving behind a trail of intrigue. "It's good to see you," he said, but there was more to his eyes than just a greeting, as if there was a long story behind the words. His gaze studied every detail, trying to unravel the true motives hidden behind the deceptively easy smile. "You survived!" the newcomer exclaimed joyfully, but an inner voice reminded the hero of the fine line that separated him from the status of a true companion. Those around him remained wary as sparks of power flickered around the hero, signaling a recently avoided but barely contained conflict. "That would be nice," came the reply, with a hint of irony as they exchanged glances, tacitly acknowledging their strange connection. As life bustled around him, his mind activated a unique skill, delving into the analysis of those around him, trying to decipher their true essence. There was a deep thoughtfulness in his eyes as he assessed the new reality he found himself in. "He is exceptional," someone whispered, noting the incredible speed of his development, which exceeded even what was predicted in the old tales. And the reason for this was clear. He increasingly challenged fate, plunging into battles where every blow was a step towards a new peak. "I asked if there was anything to say," came the demanding tone, followed by a bold answer, full of challenge and hidden hostility. His inner voice furiously cursed the insolence of his interlocutor, calling him nothing less than an idiot, but outwardly he remained unperturbed. A dark thought about the possible end flashed in his gaze, but was immediately dismissed with a joke, and he himself was advised to remove this evil look. And in the corner, like a shadow, leaning on a mangled machine gun, a figure, hidden from view, waited, whose presence felt heavy and inescapable. Tension hung in the air as the terrified survivors huddled together, their faces filled with terror and despair. Laughter and surprise mixed on their faces as they tried to comprehend the next, no less important goal of their journey. They discussed a new threat. Invaders had established their own rules, exacting tribute for what rightfully belonged to everyone. Her angry outburst collided with Song Jinwoo's cold logic. Victory required more than just courage. Her eyes reflected determination, and Jung Hee-won's memories were filled with images of the past, with harsh lessons in survival. Jeon Hee-won, overcome with righteous anger, summoned her powers, activating the skill Time of Justice to restore balance. The scales of justice swung slowly, foreshadowing inevitable retribution, and her gaze was full of unwavering faith. But the magic didn't work. The broken scales left Jung Hee-won in shock, leaving questions about the meaning and purpose of her abilities. In the heat of despair, she branded her enemies as villains, but Song Jinwoo warned her that truth is often in the eye of the beholder. His words sounded prophetic. Even the gods and constellations sometimes disagreed, failing to see the full picture of human dramas. And the bitter truth was revealed to them. Justice in this world was not absolute, but only a reflection of the interests of those who possessed power. Amidst the confused faces and growing despair, in the confined space, a plan was being hatched that could change the course of the game. An idea was voiced about a difficult but real way to defeat the powerful Kong Pil-du. The essence of the plan lay in knowledge of the enemy's weaknesses, and the protagonist began to reveal details that required decisive action. Surprise and disbelief distorted the face of one of those present when the truth about the limits of the enemy's power was revealed. It turns out that Kong Pil-du's abilities were tied to a certain green zone, and outside of it he was vulnerable. This knowledge, a simple but vital detail, gave them their only chance of victory. Outside of his territory, this formidable adversary became an ordinary man, but time passed inexorably, and new scenarios loomed, demanding immediate action from them. Fear distorted people's faces as the green zone began to manifest itself, limiting their space and choices. But amidst the chaos and panic, the protagonist's team stood firm, ready to take on any challenge. And then, as if from nowhere, a small but ominous messenger appeared, announcing the beginning of the third scenario. With his arrival, the rules of the game became stricter, and an atmosphere of cruel entertainment hung in the air. Blue screens flashed before their eyes again, each containing new, merciless instructions. Bewilderment was evident on their faces, as each scenario challenged them, breaking all their previous ideas. And a new, chilling order was heard: occupy the green zone faster than others. With eyes full of determination, the heroes watched the unfolding carnage, realizing that there would be no mercy. The instinct for self-preservation burst forth, and people who had been ordinary just yesterday now fought mercilessly for their place in the sun. Blood stained the walls, and desperate screams merged with the silence of the corridors, echoing in every corner. Amidst this inhuman struggle, the protagonist moved forward, his path illuminated only by the faint light of hope. But the harsh reality was instantly illuminated when the words, "Green Zone 01" flashed on the screen, room for only one. Some still clung to their normal lives, not realizing that they had become participants in a cruel lottery. The protagonist, with unperturbed calm, gave orders, predicting for himself a path of solitude. Separated, they felt an ominous shadow of uncertainty. Every step toward survival seemed like a step into the abyss. He watched them leave, their footsteps echoing in the eerie silence of the corridors. The premonition was confirmed when he looked at the screen, cold calculation shining through his eyes. But deep in his thoughts, another, darker truth was brewing. There was a way to salvation, but its price was unthinkable. Could they sacrifice the lives of others for their own, turning from victims into predators? Screams of horror rent the air, blood drenched the cold slabs, while one survivor looked at the chaos with eyes full of madness. But in the center of this carnage, the protagonist merely raised the corner of his lips thoughtfully, as if watching a pre-planned performance. He remained motionless, the calm in his posture frightening, while others fought for the very ability to breathe. His every action was carefully hidden from unseen observers, from those who could profit from his survival methods. His gaze, sharp and penetrating, caught every detail, every hesitation in this deadly game. But even in this isolation, his actions did not go unnoticed, and ancient forces began to question his true motives. The answer lay in the depths of his phone, in lines that held knowledge of a world others had never even suspected. And then a slight smile appeared on his face, heralding a new chapter in this bloody saga. Meanwhile, one of the survivors, overcome by primal terror, raised his weapon, and his hands became stained with blood. His eyes reflected all the pain of humanity, forced to cross the line just to exist. And the main character, watching from the side, only waved his hand slightly, realizing that survival always requires sacrifice. Yoo Joonghyuk, with a smile on his lips, dared to challenge Jinwoo's calm, teasing him with his seeming serenity. But the true purpose of his insolence was only a test, a desire to see the reaction of the one who stood in front of him. Meanwhile, the girl with the katana, her gaze sharp and her smile mysterious, slowly drew her blade. She demonstrated her skill, showing that she was ready to meet any threat without flinching. Jinwoo turned around and gave her a look full of unspoken confidence before looking forward again. Silence hung in the air, and the weight of what was to come was reflected in his eyes. But not everyone was able to understand his silent call, and one of his companions could not contain his indignation. The failed search for shelter turned into another problem. Greedy traders demanded an exorbitant fee. It turned out that someone had decided to profit from their desperation by raising prices to astronomical heights, but Jinwoo seemed to have already anticipated this move. The search was unsuccessful, and hope faded, leaving only the bitter taste of deception. Then Jinwoo raised his hand, demonstrating the two paths that were open to them in this desperate situation. His companions looked at him with anxious anticipation, trying to understand the hidden meaning of his words. The first path promised easy salvation for everyone, but experienced adventurers knew that the easy choice is rarely the best one. The second, much more dangerous, carried the threat of losses, calling into question the survival of everyone. The instinct for self-preservation pushed them to make the safe choice, ignoring the premonition that sometimes it is risk that saves from death. Before them lay two paths, each leading to survival, but along different roads. One of them is direct, lying through the death of others. Sun Jinwoo pointed to the room occupied by the weak, whose lives seemed like bargaining chips. "Kill them and take their place," he said mercilessly, outlining option 1. The faces of those present distorted with horror as they realized the cruelty of this proposal. But loyalty proved stronger than morality. Son Soo-kech was ready to commit murder for the sake of his leader. Park Kyung-gi's desperate cry interrupted his words, trying to stop this deadly impulse. Do you really think we didn't know about this method? Her voice sounded like an accusation, reminding us of the past. Pain and disgust at the violence burst forth, burning her lips. Many died at my hand at Jumho Station, Pak confessed, the weight of guilt weighing on her soul. Memories of the bloody past, of the faces of those who fell because of her, washed over her in a wave of despair. I don't want to become a monster, she whispered, a tear rolling down her cheek. Her challenging gaze met with Son Jinwoo's cold calm. Perhaps we should try option 2, suggested Yoo Joonghyuk, seeking a way to avoid bloodshed. Son Jinwoo watched them silently, weighing their fears and their hopes. His eyes closed for a moment, lost in his own thoughts. Then we will use it, he said quietly, and there was no shadow of doubt in his voice. A look of relief crossed the faces of Park Kyu and Bed Miho, as if a heavy burden had been lifted from their shoulders. But in reality, they only delayed the inevitable, not realizing that their rescue was only part of a greater plan. Whatever your choice, Son Jinwoo began, his words sounding like fate. Son Jinwoo watched them, a deep, almost fatal understanding in his eyes. I would respect him either way. At that critical moment, Son Jinwoo leaned forward, his fingers gripping a small, unsightly stone. And one more thing. He threw it with almost casual grace, a simple gesture that concealed a cold, calculating will. The air crackled with invisible energy, pink discharges pierced the space, warning of the coming event. A system message flashed across the battlefield like a fateful decree. Third major scenario begins. Once again, the merciless stream of monsters rushed forward, strengthening the feeling of an inevitable end. One of the women, her heart pounding in her chest, looked desperately at the left wall, sensing an inexplicable anomaly. Her eyes widened in sudden realization, her lips silently whispering, "Ah!" And at that moment, the wall itself split, revealing a glowing green portal, a path to a completely different reality. A monstrous, bear-like creature rushed forward, its claws tearing at the air, sowing panic among the fleeing people. One of the women, Baek Miho, instinctively reached out her hand towards the mysterious glow, towards the new path that had just opened up. The monster seemed to feel the same call, stretching out a clawed paw, but an invisible force pushed it away from the source of light. Baek Miho's palm touched the shimmering surface of the portal, and a wave of blinding, protective energy passed through it. A powerful explosion of light sent her and Song Il-hwan flying backwards, while a system message ominously confirmed, the hidden space, Brave's Haven, has been activated. Stunned, Baek Miho froze, her gaze fixed on the green glow behind which the monster hid with a furious roar. Song Il-hwan seemed to start to disappear, his body trembling, but two women rushed to catch him, pulling him away from the approaching threat. "What about Dokja?" one exclaimed, supporting Song Il-hwan, whose consciousness seemed to have left him. Meanwhile, in another dimension, Son Jinwoo, breathing heavily, carried Yoo Joonghyuk on his back, quickly running away from the dark pursuers. Both of their faces were tense, they knew that every step could be the last in this blood-red nightmare. All around them, creatures squealed and growled, their red eyes burning with bloodlust, their sharp claws almost reaching their target. Every movement was accompanied by blows and splashes of blood, leaving behind dark and ominous traces. Song Jinwoo fought back desperately, his strikes fast and accurate despite Yoo Joonghyuk's heavy burden. His gaze was focused, every decision was made instantly, because the slightest mistake could cost his life. And then, through the bloody curtain, Yoo Joonghyuk saw a strange green glow, and in it, Song Il-hwan, clutching a baseball bat. Song Il-hwan stood in the center of the light zone, his face twisted in a furious scowl, his bat glowing with an unearthly light. As Song Jinwoo continued his desperate fight, someone's voice, full of malicious glee, echoed, "Ha ha ha!" The system, as if observing what was happening, asked, "Perhaps it is worth applying penalties?" and immediately announced its verdict, "Penalties applied." Song Il-hwan's face twisted in sudden realization, his eyes widening and his own form seeming to pixelate. With a loud cry of "Y-A-A-A-A," Song Il-hwan launched into a desperate attack as the monsters pounced on him, drenching the floor with fresh blood. Yoo Joonghyuk groaned, wounded, as the monsters pressed forward, but Song Jinwoo stood by his side, repelling them like a shield. A mysterious object flickered in Song Jinwoo's hand, and he thought about that terrible night, remembering that Yoo Joonghyuk was a real monster for having experienced such a thing. Song Jinwoo hacked and slashed in a furious dance of death, each blow of his glowing blade leaving bloody marks. Yoo Joonghyuk, exhausted and wounded, offered to leave him, but Song Jinwoo was too absorbed in the battle to listen. Something made Song Jinwoo flinch, his eyes widened and cold sweat broke out on his forehead. Whether it was fear or determination, there was tension on his face, washed in the crimson light of chaos. "Why are you helping us?" Yoo Joonghyuk asked, not understanding Song Jinwoo's motives, since it would have been easier for him to do it alone. Song Jinwoo merely gave a look of dark concentration, his blade glowing as he prepared to strike again. "I don't know how to explain this," Song Jinwoo thought, his thoughts racing through the roar of battle. In the distance, through the dust and battle, other survivors anxiously asked about the fate of their comrades, almost despairing of seeing anything. The firm grip on the hilt of the weapon, in which blue energy pulsed, reflected an unbending will. And again, a deadly dance. Blue flashes of light pierced the monsters, tearing them to shreds, and Shunwoo was at the very epicenter. Yoo Joonghyuk listened to his savior ponder what would be more convenient and profitable, but there was a but in his voice. Song Jinwoo, carrying Yoo Joonghyuk on his back, deftly dodged the attacks, remembering those who failed because they acted purely out of calculation. "I'm not the main character, and I can't become the savior," Song Jinwoo's gaze seemed to say, but his determination said something else. He then erected a shimmering blue barrier, standing in the center of it, holding Yoo Joonghyuk tightly to himself, surrounded by a roaring horde. "Lean on me," Song Jinwoo whispered, and in his eyes, Yoo Joonghyuk saw a promise of protection as unbreakable as light itself. And instantly, the world around exploded with movement as Song Jinwoo lunged forward, his blade blazing with purple light piercing the air. He pressed Yoo Joonghyuk against him, forming a living shield, while the purple energy repelled the desperate attacks of the monsters from all directions. One after another, the monsters fell, cut to pieces by his blade, their blood spraying like fountains in the crimson twilight. A tense expression appeared on Song Jinwoo's face, but he held Yoo Joonghyuk tightly, not allowing the horror to consume them. Through the smoke and flames, Yoo Joonghyuk desperately pointed at the new shadows that were approaching from the depths of the corridor. Song Jinwoo planted his foot firmly on the bloody ground, preparing for another attack. Suddenly, after a devastating blow from the blade, the space around them distorted, and Yoo Joonghyuk couldn't believe his eyes. Song Jinwoo stood in the middle of the blood-soaked arena, surrounded by a greenish glow, as if a portal to another world had opened up just for him. A barely noticeable smile played on his face, reflecting a calm unknown in this hellish slaughter. His steps echoed dully in the ensuing silence. "Hey!" Song Jinwoo called out, pointing towards the dimly lit passage where salvation seemed to await. Yoo Joonghyuk was still clinging to him, but Song Jinwoo's gaze was already directed into the distance, beyond their current nightmare. He reminded Yoo Joonghyuk of his own strength, that survival was possible even outside of this cursed room. But Yoo Joonghyuk was on edge, his mind racing between horror and outrage, barely holding back the urge to break down. He muttered a strangled, "Oh," realizing the full depth of the situation and the inevitability of the choice. Song Jinwoo turned around, his gaze focused and filled with grim determination. From somewhere came a demand to save even just one, the child, and Song Jinwoo, gritting his teeth, agreed. But suddenly, Song Jinwoo pulled him along, and Yoo Joonghyuk's desperate cry of "Hyung, wait!" broke the dead silence. The blade flared again, Song Jinwoo slashing at the approaching creature, while Yoo Joonghyuk clung to him, begging for it to stop. Song Jinwoo's face twisted into a grimace of concentration, each blow draining the last of his strength. And Song Jinwoo, as if from the side, watched himself, immersed in the emerald glow. His face remained impassive, as did his determination. "You won't get it," Song Jinwoo croaked hoarsely as the hordes of monsters closed in around him, preparing to tear him apart. Hundreds of eyes, burning with rage, stared at him, anticipating easy prey. The explosive impact scattered everything around, leaving behind only clouds of smoke and debris. Just a moment ago, hordes of monsters were ready to attack, but now their lifeless bodies lay in heaps on the floor, while someone's voice desperately screamed the name. He remembered how, moments before being completely immersed in the carnage, he swallowed a mysterious shining crystal, a source of incredible power. From the bodies of the fallen monsters, barely noticeable blue lights began to rise, like souls searching for a new home. The process of summoning shadows began, enveloping the space in an otherworldly light. Each light pulsed, filling the air with a strange hum, a harbinger of inevitable change. And so, in the center of this unearthly glow, Song Jinwoo, clutching the frightened Yoo Joonghyuk in his hand, looked at the world around him, ready to turn it upside down. His figure, shrouded in a mystical glow, seemed ghostly and unshakable, and the shadows around him took shape. Suddenly, the world went dark, and then eyes widened, full of horror and incomprehension. A headache pierced his temples as Song Jinwoo woke up, trying to figure out where he was and what had happened. The memories were hazy, like fragments of someone else's dream slipping from memory. His gaze fell on a horrifying picture, the lifeless body of a woman on the floor and another figure standing over her like a grim guard. A system message flashed before his eyes, warning him of a weakening of the fourth wall, the barrier separating him from true reality. His heart began to pound wildly as he realized that what lay before him was not an illusion, but a cruel truth that his mind had tried with all its might to reject. He fell to his knees, his hand instinctively reaching for his fallen sword, as if trying to grab onto something tangible in the chaos. His breath caught in his throat, his lungs burned, every cell in his body screamed from the strain, as if he was suffocating in a void. His face twisted in horror. Cold sweat broke out on his forehead. The reality he had been running from for so long had finally caught up with him. But deep within that horror, a spark of determination flickered. He still had his trump card, a chance to avoid total collapse. He remembered the spiritual spectrum stone he had found on the way to Chunmuro Station, an artifact that granted temporary invisibility for monsters. The thought of using this dirty trick was disgusting, but there was no other way. While the fourth wall was being restored, he had to wait, but suddenly, a familiar name flashed through his thoughts. Yoo Joonghyuk? His eyes widened in bewilderment, as if someone had suddenly broken the silence of his internal struggle. And then the world turned upside down. A figure appeared before him, hovering in the air, and the system window strangely reflected her name. He met her gaze, and, as if reading his mind, she said, "Are you Yoo Joonghyuk?" causing him to become confused. "No, it doesn't seem to be him," flashed through his head, and his body suddenly responded with old wounds, as if warning of danger. "Are you Korean?" came an unfamiliar but commanding voice, and he was surprised to see the foreigner's golden hair. Her gaze, piercing and fiery, seemed to blaze with red light, revealing something more than simple curiosity. "Who are you, then?" she demanded, her face calm but her eyes burning, demanding the truth. He clenched his teeth, trying to find the right words, but suddenly something important dawned on him that could change everything. Her profile was sharp and focused, and her gaze, as if piercing through him, waited for his reaction. The system window displayed her details. Anna Croft, prophet and savior, with a whole arsenal of skills, including lie detector. Prophet Anna Croft, she introduced herself, and the name struck him with surprise, for he knew much more about her than he could let on. "How do you know my name?" he asked, trying to buy time, and then, with a crooked grin, he said, "I am also a prophet." However, Anna Croft's lie detector instantly called his bluff, confirming that such tricks would not work on real prophets. Anna Croft, not accustomed to deception, demanded an answer. But her interlocutor, with undisguised disappointment, was only thinking about the next strategy. And his indifference to her prophetic gift was a real shock to her. With a smile full of hidden meaning, he reminded her of the gift she had received, offering to repay in the same coin, broken faith. Then Anna realized, in front of her was not just a person, but someone who had risked looking into the very depths of her soul, demanding for his gift the most valuable thing, her broken faith. And while she was trying to comprehend what was happening, he began to dissolve, disappearing from her reality. His image shattered into digital fragments, and even her all-seeing eye couldn't keep him in sight. With a final smirk, he challenged her to meet him on the other side of the world. And then he disappeared from her sight, leaving Anna Croft completely confused. Somewhere in the void, hidden from prying eyes, the exhausted hero barely breathed. He collapsed, gaining immunity from the illusory prison at the last moment, a mocking reward for a test already passed. His head was spinning, his thoughts were confused, and only one thing tormented him: where were his comrades, and how much time had passed? In confusion, he tried to get up, but the world around him was still spinning. Suddenly, through the haze of consciousness, he heard familiar voices. 3 people, his faithful companions, leaned over him, their faces shining with joy and relief. The hero's gaze was filled with a mixture of shock and indescribable gratitude. And then he saw them, the bodies of those who did not survive this nightmare, lying in scarlet puddles on the floor. Each new dawn only served as a reminder of those who did not live to see it, whose lives were cut short in senseless cruelty. The woman whispered quietly that celebrating their rescue would be sacrilege because they had lost too much. Kim Dokja, bending over the lifeless body, tried to piece together the fragments of time, while his companions begged him to rest. But the sudden question about Gil Young made everyone shudder, because his absence was much more eloquent than any words. Kim Dokja's face reflected pure shock. A premonition of something unspeakably terrible pierced him. The blood-soaked corridor seemed endless, and the words that all this had happened very recently only intensified the oppressive feeling of inevitability. The tall figure of Kim Dokja looked at Yoo Joonghyuk, who, gritting his teeth, tried to hear something hidden from his understanding. At that moment, Kim Dokja suddenly remembered that strange look, those questions that then seemed so innocent. "Are you sure you won't come with me?" Kim Dokja asked, and Yoo Joonghyuk confirmed his choice without hesitation. He offered Yoo Joonghyuk a path to power, promising rapid growth, but he, despite everything, remained loyal to his companions. "Stupid boy," flashed through his mind as the second stage of his unique skill, Omniscient Reader, activated, revealing new facets of understanding. Kim Dokja wanted to say so much more, but fatigue weighed heavily on him, depriving him of the strength for words. Suddenly, Yoo Jin-ho looked at him in surprise, as if he had just realized something important. "Kim Dokja." Yoo Jin-ho's desperate cry rang out as he rushed forward, trying to stop the retreating shadow. But for Kim Dokja, this was just a waste of time, because something much more important was waiting for him ahead. In Yoo Jin-ho's arms, Kim Dokja's heart trembled for a moment, but his mind was occupied with something else, a strange premonition that something else needed to be captured. His gaze, tired and deep, slid across the floor, reflecting the internal struggle and accumulated tension. However, the measured breathing of sleep was interrupted by the voice of the system, mercilessly reminding of the past hours and the trials to come. Kim Dokja slowly came to his senses, his consciousness, as if from the depths, breaking through the veil of fatigue. And the first one to greet his awakening was Yoo Sanga, her soft voice sounding like a gentle breeze after a storm. With a slight grin, Kim Dokja glanced at Hyun Song-si, asking about the comfort of his makeshift pillow. Hyun Song-si, still caught up in his dreams, muttered something about roll call, giving away echoes of his army past. Dokja winced, realizing that he hadn't just been sleeping but using the man as support, and the thought caused a slight confusion. His neck ached, but the system's sympathy message from Judge Hellfire only added a sarcastic note to his discomfort. He remembered the curious constellations spying on their fates, and the system confirmed that the night outside the green zone had passed. Despite the pain and fatigue, a glimmer of determination flashed in Kim Dokja's eyes. There were finally enough coins for the next step. He announced the upcoming completion of the third scenario, causing Gil Young, who was lying next to him, to look up in surprise. The path to a new chapter lay through the green zone, a temporary refuge promising a brief lull. There, among fellow survivors, a deceptive illusion of normality reigned, or even reading newspapers seemed ordinary. Hyun Sung-si, who had fully woken up, looked questioningly at Kim Dokja, sensing the change in the air. They exchanged words. Dokja confirmed that he had rested a little, trying to hide the depth of his fatigue. Then, Hyun Song-si noticed that Kim Dokja was talking in his sleep, mentioning a certain soldier, Hyun Sung, which aroused suspicion. Dokja hastened to cover it up by mentioning an old army injury. But Hyun Song-si was puzzled. He thought Dokja was an officer. With a smile, Kim Dokja explained the unusual promotion, confirming his exceptionalism, although his true thoughts remained beyond the pale. Dokja guessed that Hyun Song-si's army years had not been easy, although he could not fully appreciate the depth of his experiences. "Really?" Hyun Song-si asked with genuine sincerity, feeling that Dokja's presence truly brought them a sense of security. In the dim corridor, Dokja was energetically explaining something to Hyun Song-si, while Yoo Jin-ho watched their conversation with interest. Dokja continued his story, his confident tone and gestures attracting attention, and Hyun Song-si listened attentively, trying to understand his intention. Suddenly, Dokja turned away, his gaze becoming thoughtful, while behind him, the other members of the group, including the child, looked after him with concern. With a serious expression, Dokja addressed them, explaining that he had just shown them a model of behavior that they must now follow. The boy asked in confusion, "Why?" and Dokja replied that it was for Hyun Song-si's sake, to help him find himself. Dokja looked back at Hyun Song-si, whose depression was evident, remembering how his heroic act had once awakened the hidden strength within him. In the depths of this world, through pain and struggle, attributes blossomed, granting heroes new powers when they were ready for them. Kim Dokja, lost in thought, realized that now was the time for Lee Hyun Sung's attribute to reach its next level. Dokja, quoting a proverb about the power of words, tried to encourage Hyun Song-si, who, holding the shield in his hands, already felt an increasing sense of responsibility. The women and the child looked at Dokja with hope, wanting to restore Hyun Song-si's former confidence, and began to ask about his mysterious patron. Continuing his speech, Dokja indicated that all that was needed was to simply talk to Han Seong-shi, but his evasiveness aroused more and more suspicion. Jung Hee-won, sitting next to Hyun Sun-si, compared him to an indestructible pine tree, and he, seemingly flattered, simply thanked her. With a smile, Hyun Sung-shi admitted that his favorite song was Blue Pine, and at that moment his confidence seemed to grow. However, Jung Hee-won only looked at him in bewilderment, noticing that her question was about something completely different. All of Lee Hun-sung's confidence instantly vanished, and Jung Hee-won only sighed, realizing that her words had not had the desired effect. Dokja covered his face in embarrassment, while behind him, against the backdrop of bloodstains, a woman and a child looked at him with confusion and surprise. Meanwhile, Jung Hee-won continued to praise Lee Hyun-sung for his sense of justice, to which he, embarrassed, quickly retorted. Deep down, he pondered his actions, the true nature of his justice, while the system message confirmed his inner turmoil. The woman merely thanked him softly, accepting his modesty, unaware that a completely different game was unfolding behind the scenes. Watching from the sidelines, Dokja, the woman and the child could not contain their amazement at how easily they had managed to manipulate the situation. Yoo Jin-ho sincerely admired Lee Hyun-sung's strength, and Lee Hyun-sung, flattered, thanked him, unaware of his ulterior motive. How simple, flashed through Dokja's mind, while Jung Hae-won and the child also seemed to realize the comical nature of the situation and the ease of their deception. Lee Hun-sung walked away, lost in his thoughts, and the trio, hiding around the corner, watched him go, knowing that the plan had been successfully launched. He sat down, humbly biding his time, ready to reveal himself at any moment, his inner world reflected in the systemic message of patient waiting. Dokja, with a smile on his face, turned to Yoo Jin-ho, asking if he had managed to obtain the information he needed. Yoo Jin-ho, at first with annoyance, then with eagerness, pointed to the first floor, where, according to his information, the target was located, and Dokja hurried down. His confident step up the escalator was a harbinger of things to come, each climb bringing him closer to the unknown. A detail of his outfit, a red tassel, fluttered in time with his movements, adding drama to his silent advance. Dokja descended through the dim light of the stairwell, his hand gripping his blade tightly, his gaze focused and determined. Ahead, at elevator number 423, a group of men were already waiting for him, one of whom mockingly called out to Dokju, remembering his recent intrusion. They laughed at him, surprised by his audacity and the fact that he survived without finding the mystical room, without even guessing his true intentions. Dokja counted silently to himself, his gaze sliding over the holographic projections, analyzing the invisible opponents. One of them invited Dokja to join their alliance, but with one condition, to bring those same girls with him. In the background, Dokja moved calmly, surrounded by phantom silhouettes that were as real to him as the threat before him. The gang leader, irritated by Dokji's silence, tried to get his attention, but he only waved him off, promising to think about their proposal. Amid the bloody stains on the floor, Dokja reflected that the rooms, although smaller, would still be enough for his sinister plan, while the bandits looked after him in bewilderment. Finally, Dokja headed down to the -1st floor, to the place where answers awaited him. But the path turned out to be not so simple. The sharp blade of a knife suddenly touched his neck, causing him to flinch. Behind him stood the figure he had seen before, katana in hand, ready to attack. "I'm a little disappointed, Ajusi." Lee Ji-hai's voice rang out, her words sharp as steel. The katana in her hand glinted in the ghostly light, highlighting her determination and skill. He didn't sense her approach, and only one conclusion suggested itself: she had used ghost steps. "My help?" Lee Ji-hai asked again, her voice laced with distrust bordering on defiance. He looked at her with confidence, anticipating the next move in this deadly game. His gaze was cold and penetrating, ready for any surprises hidden in the depths of this place. Lee Ji-hai seemed to understand him better than anyone else, her sly smile foreshadowing new discoveries. Others, less discerning, doubted her intentions, asking whether she could be trusted in the trials ahead. Lee Ji-hai herself looked into the distance, at the world, broken and distorted, holding her faithful staff in her hands. Song Jin-woo, in turn, assessed every possibility, every detail that could play into their hands. Her harsh words about the inevitable death of the majority, sounding like an echo of someone else's cynical wisdom, left no room for illusions. But Song Jin-woo had knowledge that could shed light on her past, on the shadows that had haunted her for a long time. His words struck her like lightning, revealing old wounds and causing her eyes to widen in shock. Images of the past, when violence was the only way to survive, appeared before her mind's eye. Behind them there remained only a trail of blood, evidence of the brutality of past battles and the battles to come. Among the greenish reflections of neon, those whom fear ordered not to be allowed to come out of the darkness, begging to leave, emerged. But one of the newcomers, a young man with a sword, only apologized guiltily without explaining his arrival. Dokja, standing in the shadows, silently watched what was happening, his gaze sharp as a blade. "I'm not sure that everything will work out," he admitted, feeling the weight of other people's expectations, but his companion only encouraged him, seeing Dokja as a guiding star. The two of them, encouraging each other, rushed up the stairs towards the unknown, but Dokja, feeling such support for the first time, smiled. For the first time, even in the army, no one believed in him like that, and this new feeling was both frightening and empowering. His companion, Lee Hyun-song, clutched his club tightly in his hands, ready to meet any threat. The system confirmed their connection. The character Lee Hyun-sung has begun to open up to you, cementing the bond that was just beginning to grow stronger. Hyun-sung, smiling shyly, admitted that he didn't know how to explain his feelings, but he admired Yoo Joonghyuk's friendly bond. They found themselves on the top platform, overlooking the disturbing scene below. Three thugs held a young woman in fear, her desperate cries for help echoing throughout the cold space. "Don't pay any attention to her," Dokja said coldly, pushing aside thoughts of someone else's misfortune. "She doesn't sell rooms." His eyes reflected only cold determination, a look that promised no mercy. Lee Hyun-sung, however, could not remain indifferent. His face was distorted with indignation and anger. But suddenly, Dokja's voice broke the silence. "Let her go," addressed to the gang leader, who was taken aback by such insolence. "Who are you to command us?" the bandit roared, while Lee Hyun-sung, behind him, felt his thirst for justice awaken. Now Lee Hyun-sung stood surrounded by a light green glow, his eyes glowing with determination, ready to fight. His hand tightened its grip on the weapon. The anticipation of an imminent battle was felt in every movement. Without wasting a second, Dokja invested his accumulated coins into increasing his stats, preparing for the inevitable clash. And then chaos began. With roars and shouts, Dokja and Lee Hyun-sung rushed into the attack, catching the bandits by surprise. The bandits, caught off guard, tried to understand the source of the sudden chaos, but it was too late. Dokja, light and deadly, rained down blows on them, the steel flashing in the dim light. One by one, the enemy fell, their screams echoing in the damp atmosphere. He moved with frightening speed, leading only horror and confusion in his wake. The sudden commotion also reached Kong Pil-do, who had been immersed in reading the newspaper until that moment. However, his fighters soon came to their senses, trying to surround the uninvited guests. Lee Hyun-sung, like an ancient guardian, extended his shield, preparing to receive the blow. His defense proved impenetrable, repelling attacks with incredible force. Using the mountain mover stigma, he swept away his enemies, tossing them aside like ragdolls. But suddenly, as if by someone's will, the space around changed, announcing an invasion. Kong Pil-do activated his stigma, Arm Zone, turning a room into a death trap. The spheres began their attack, raining down fiery projectiles as Dokja dodged the deadly traps. He danced between the fire, his movements quick and precise. The roar of the explosion shook everything around, raising clouds of smoke and dust. But Dokja stood firm, his gaze sharp and his determination unwavering. Having strengthened their endurance, they stood amidst the destruction, ready to continue the fight. And Kong Pil-do, watching what was happening, just casually tapped his finger. He realized that these were not just random intruders, but he also had a premonition of the true motives for their appearance. Dokja, parrying his grin, announced that he had not come to pay for his place, but to take it by force. Kong Pil-do, with a disdainful smile, sensed their intentions, but he could not even imagine the scale of what was to come. Lee Hyun-sung froze, realizing the danger that was approaching them, and his heart began to beat wildly. His eyes reflected only a ruthless intent to destroy the uninvited guests. However, Dokja, standing at the forefront, remained unmoved, his gaze cold and determined. And now the enemy, having paid for his insolence, collapsed, leaving behind only a bloody trail. Hyun-sung-shi, having come to his senses, asked about Dokja, but his friend was focused on something else. Lee Hyun-sung, despite his fear, prepared to follow the order. Dokja, with a cold smile, gave his order, which was supposed to change the course of the battle. And Lee Hyun-sung accepted it without hesitation, feeling his strength growing. His attributes awakened, and the energy that had been bubbling within began to burst forth. A golden glow enveloped Lee Hyun-sung, transforming him, making him stronger. The energy concentrated in his fist was ready to fall upon his enemies. It pulsed, forming into protection and a weapon, becoming a part of him. Lee Hyun-sung's face took on a stern expression, revealing an unwavering determination. He stood in the center of a storm woven from his own strength, ready for the decisive blow. The Mountain Destroyer stigma activated, turning him into a living weapon. And now, like an ancient deity, he unleashed all his power to crush the enemy. The final chord began, a cry of desperate power bursting from the depths. The power hidden within burst forth, shaking the very ground beneath their feet with the roar of the elements. A dull thud and a shockwave swept across the entire perimeter, causing those around to freeze in horror. The floor crumbled and fell apart underfoot, and the air was filled with the sounds of falling and the crash of debris. The protective barriers could not withstand the onslaught of unbridled force, collapsing one after another. What was considered unshakable turned to dust and chaos under powerful blows, erasing the boundaries of reality. When the dust settled, only two remained among the rubble, their presence a beacon in the midst of destruction. Song Jinwoo turned to Yoo Jinho, remembering their agreement to tell his story when it was all over. Yoo Jinho replied that he wanted to know his path as well, and their bond grew stronger amidst the chaos. A genuine smile lit up the gloomy scene as Song Jinwoo held his sword, ready for whatever lay ahead. Song Jinwoo, one of the strongest characters, was pondering his thoughts, his gaze sharp and penetrating. It once seemed to him that all this would be absurdly boring and predictable. But now he felt only a strange, almost awkward curiosity about what would happen next. A weak, pleading voice came from the rubble, tearing them from their thoughts about the future. They looked down to where, from the chaos of concrete and steel, a cry for help was heard. Under a pile of rocks lay a man, bloodied and broken, but still clinging to life. His fate hung in the balance, and now he was completely dependent on their will. Even on the brink of death, he managed to spit out an angry curse at those who betrayed or abandoned him. And at that moment, Song Jinwoo smiled, a smile that promised both hope and something more sinister. Under his foot, the earth seemed to tremble in anticipation, foreshadowing new, inevitable turns of fate. Amidst the debris and dust, Yoo Jinho looked around, his gaze filled with confusion. He called out sharply to the one standing next to him, his voice seeming to carry notes of alarm and question. A scene of total destruction lay before them, and the question hung in the air, who dared to do this? With a slight smirk, one of them noted mockingly that the room had given in to the blows much more easily than one might have expected. But the true reason was hidden in Song Jinwoo's cold smile, which only angered those who were already on the edge. He clutched his head as if trying to fight off an invisible storm inside him, while his companions looked at him with concern. His torment was so intense that even the cosmos seemed to mock him, recording his pain as some kind of malicious pleasure. Meanwhile, others, exhausted and wounded, tried to climb out from under the rubble, their faces distorted by fear. Suddenly, their gazes turned upwards to a floating object with a red tassel that appeared out of nowhere. The woman with long, dark hair, sword at the ready, chuckled calmly, assessing the situation as easy prey. Her movements were swift and precise, evidence that she had been trained to fight opponents superior to her strength. And now they are already here, she said, pointing in the direction where a new battle was soon to unfold. Enraged men rushed towards them, their screams echoing throughout the ruined space, foreshadowing a brutal battle. But there was no trace of fear on their faces, only calm as shining protective barriers materialized around them. With a smile on her lips, she prepared to fight back, and behind her, like faithful shadows, stood other warriors, ready for battle. Song Jinwoo pointed his finger with a mischievous smile, and a mysterious glow flashed in the air, heralding the beginning of his actions. Yoo Jinho, despite his obvious anxiety, promised to cover his companion, his stick being his only defense. His face was distorted with tension, but the determination in his eyes left no doubt he was ready to stand to the end. Off to the side, while discussing tactics, one of the companions asked how many more times this special ability could be used, anticipating its value. Yoo Jinho, trembling with fear, felt a firm hand on his shoulder, trying to calm his anxiety. A quiet, confident voice whispered in his ear that there was no need to worry, they would not have to fight. However, deep in the ruined space, where crimson reflections foreshadowed the coming carnage, their group stood in full readiness. Meanwhile, other hunters watched the system messages in horror. Green zones destroyed, main scenario ended early. New information on the screen, ringing with a cold warning, announced that the difficulty would depend on the time remaining. Surrounded by these digital prophecies, Song Jinwoo remained impenetrable, his gaze as cold as the flickering text. Suddenly, a crimson glow engulfed everything around, and terrifying silhouettes with glowing red eyes began to emerge from the shadows. Animal faces, distorted by a ferocious roar, filled the space, their predatory gazes foreshadowing imminent reprisal. Song Jinwoo, overcome by a premonition of disaster, suddenly shouted out, calling someone's name, Hyun Song-shi. But it was too late. The fighter who tried to fight back was forced to retreat under the onslaught of superior forces. On a higher level, away from the chaos, Song Jinwoo and his companions watched the unfolding disaster, surrounded by a strange blue light. Song Jinwoo's eyes narrowed, reflecting an icy calm and unwavering determination that heralded imminent action. They stood on the steps like unwavering guards, ready to accept the challenge of fate, no matter what lay ahead. "It seems you still don't understand anything," Seong Jinwoo said, and with a crushing force he thrust his sword into the ground, splitting it. A powerful wave of blue energy threw the opponent's back, leaving them confused and afraid of its overwhelming power. Her voice cut through the tense silence, telling her of the only way to pass this deadly test. Below them, in a gaping abyss, the world was collapsing, taking with it their hopes for easy salvation. Song Jinwoo looked down at them calmly, his eyes filled with deep yet silent thought, while the crowd, gripped by fear, blamed him for everything that was happening, looking for someone to blame. But his answer was a silent display of strength, golden energy flaring in his fist, denying their arguments. The sudden release of energy stunned them, leaving them terrified of its unimaginable power. In just an instant, the three most aggressive opponents turned into spineless shadows, falling prostrate. Seong Jinwoo clenched his fist and felt the power pulsing through his veins, ready for further action. Next to him, Sun Jina realized the scale of what was happening, her eyes reflecting a dark understanding. Then a blue system panel appeared in front of them, announcing the activation of a unique skill, bookmarks. At that moment, Song Jinwoo activated the third bookmark, launching a powerful incitement for 5 minutes. His aura intensified, enveloping the group in a glow as the terrified people below looked up at him with horror and awe. Even PPILDU, their leader, froze in panic, realizing for the first time the true threat. Sweat was pouring down his face, his eyes wide with pure fear, foreshadowing the inevitable retribution. He rushed around, trying to convince the others that the third scenario wasn't that difficult, while his people begged for salvation. Song Jinwoo explained with a slight smile that the monsters would appear in sufficient numbers to ensure victory if everyone fought. The crowd pressed around PPILDU, begging him to unite and fight back, looking to him as their last hope. But the sudden appearance of a monster behind them interrupted all arguments, forcing PPILDU to gather his people. With cries of terror and determination, they rushed forward, covering their leader as he attempted to create an armed zone. However, their desperate attack was met with instant, deadly reprisal as the monster's jaws closed on the front ranks. Kim Dokja, staring intently at the chaos unfolding around him, calls out to his companions. Another survivor, overcome with fear, tried to fight off the approaching darkness, his strength fading. Meanwhile, Yoo Sang-ashi rushed to her wounded comrade, providing first aid, while Kim Dokja calmly watched the events unfold. Yoo Jin-ho looked at Kim Dokja with worry in his eyes, trying to figure out his impenetrable calm. And so, Kim Dokja, standing with a shimmering blade, announced the imminent end of the scenario, which doomed some to failure. With a slight grin, he said that someone simply ran out of time and the reward for survival slipped away. Despair and rage gripped those left defenseless, their faces contorted into grimaces of helplessness. Under the cover of a scarlet haze, Kim Dokja and his comrades stood on the steps like spectators in this theater of death. At that moment, a new skill, Private Territory, activated below, enveloping the ground in an ominous red glow. A terrifying sight opened up from above. Hundreds of people were running in panic from giant shadows, their screams lost in the roar of battle. Phantom machine guns appeared out of nowhere, unleashing a barrage of fire on the crowd, blowing it to shreds. Amid the roar of gunfire and explosions, cries rang out from those who still believed in their leader, calling him Pil-du. While discussing the mana costs, they came to the conclusion that Pil-du was able to cope on his own for now, and their help was not required. Amid the incessant explosions, Hyun-sun suggested they enjoy the moment, as they now had some free time. One of them even complained that he hadn't slept enough, but there was a worrying question in the air. Will everything be okay? They sat on the steps, as if they had occupied the best seats in the auditorium, watching someone else's struggle. The young man looked into the distance with a mocking smile, as if enjoying the bloody spectacle. They were just unlucky, came the calm reply, while Kung Pil-du, overcome with rage and pain, screamed curses below. His gaze was empty, his face was covered in sweat, he had reached his limit, and even his powerful stigma could not stop the inevitable. Kung Pil-du's rage and despair gave his abilities a new impetus, as if the elements themselves were responding to his pain. And with a new skill, Strong Barricade, from the chaos of battle a creature was born that could withstand any onslaught. From above, Kim Dokja and Yoo Sang-ah watched as Ajusi seemed to have aged years in this meat grinder, and his recent words about saving him sounded like a mockery. Meanwhile, Hee-won slept, her body finally finding the peace that exhaustion had given her. Yoo Sang-ah merely shrugged indifferently when asked about Yoo Joonghyuk's whereabouts, remarking that Master was too busy for such trifles. However, a subtle smile flashed across Kim Dokja's face, foreshadowing something that only he knew. Then there was Yoo Sang-ah, engrossed in her phone, and Kim Dokja, sitting sullenly next to her, as if each of them existed in their own reality. His eyes reflected deep concentration, and his gaze was directed somewhere beyond the visible, into a calculating future. Bi-hoon, the adorable demon, was jubilant at the prospect of expanding his channel, until a voice told him how to cleverly announce a commercial break. Kim Dokja casually counted out the coins, knowing that the price of knowledge was always high, while Yoo Sang-ah watched him with slight concern. Her gaze was full of questions, incomprehension in the face of his composure, and inexplicable actions. Strange objects appeared in Kim Dokja's hands, vials of shining liquid and an ancient sponsorship contract, an artifact worth 10,000 coins. But before anyone could process these bold words, a mocking voice belonging to the little demon rang out in the air, dismissively rebuking the panic-stricken Pildu, making it clear that the true dialogue was not unfolding for his ears. Against the backdrop of a radiant, almost ghostly environment, Songjin Drew, calm and unwavering, held the document as a symbol of his will, while others, wounded and tired, listened to his mysterious words among the healing elixirs placed there. Pildu's eyes, distorted with horror, questioned the unthinkable, while Songjin, with slight thoughtfulness, only confirmed that the boundaries of the possible had long been erased for him. A sudden whirlwind of flame engulfed the space, lifting the screaming demon into the air, and the crowd below, gripped by bewilderment, wondered at the nature of this chaotic yet majestic display of power. And as the fiery flashes reflected in his eyes, Pildu, his face twisted in agony, suddenly realized that behind this power lay a tragic story, the whispers of which told of a destroyed world and immeasurable loss. Pildu, once a fearsome master of defense, had his life hanging by a thread, and hanging over him was the cruel reality that even the Constellations couldn't toss coins forever. "He's definitely going to die!" A desperate cry broke the tense silence, but the protagonist's gaze remained calm, acknowledging the inexorable truth. If we leave things as they are, then yes. But the protagonist, with cold confidence in his eyes, had already made his decision, while below, Pildu was writhing in pain, calling on his mysterious protection. A holographic screen flickered before him, offering possibilities hidden from ordinary mortals. Even the Master of Defense himself, presented in a bizarre guise, stared in surprise at the text of the contract, which he was now studying with all seriousness. A slight smile touched the hero's lips. The Master of Defense Constellation asked for time to think, clearly not expecting such a turn of events. But the main character, indifferent to their cries, only turned away, surrounded by the mysterious glow of the blue screens. His finger pointed somewhere to the side, and the words sounded like a sentence. "The most important thing for me, number 3. And in that confident smile that he threw towards the invisible spectator, there was hidden a silent question about the price of the deal that was about to be completed. Amidst the crimson haze of despair, Pildu begged for salvation, his body wounded and his voice trembling before the invisible threat. Some force, as if injecting new life, poured a mysterious, shimmering purple elixir into his body. Songjinwoo's gaze, filled with a strange confidence, slid over the frightened faces, handing them something that would be their only chance to fight. Wounded in his pride, but not broken, Pildu clutched the saving flask in his hands, challenging his invisible accusers. The cork popped, and life-giving purple liquid splashed out, promising incredible transformation. Having greedily emptied the vessel, Pildu felt a surge of strength, and the broken glass at his feet became a symbol of future retribution and a terrible promise. Rage flared in his eyes, and a new energy coursed through his veins, transforming his despair into a fierce determination. Answering the unspoken questions, Songjinwoo gave a parting word, making his companions feel the full weight and inevitability of the upcoming battle. Mysterious smile, barely illuminated from within, concealed a depth of intentions inaccessible to mere mortals. Pildu, overcome with shock, was at a loss for words, his gestures expressing a complete lack of understanding of what was happening. Songjinwoo watched the reaction with an unperturbed expression as a message about a mysterious patron seeking amusement in the suffering of others appeared in his mind. Suddenly, Songjinwoo announced his short-term departure, leaving his companions confused and questioning. Dokja, who had called out to him with a worried voice, asked about his intentions, but Songjinwoo only continued on his way without turning around. Songjinwoo's eyes, filled with deep determination, pierced the invisible veil of the future, foreshadowing new trials. Dokja's gaze was full of fatigue and vague anxiety, reflecting the burden of some secret or premonition. The phone screen flashed with lines telling of Yoo Joonghyuk's endless regressions, whose pain seemed to be transmitted through the numbers. Sung Jinwoo was completely absorbed in the contents of the screen, while Dokja, looking over his shoulder, mentally cursed the third regression and Yoo Joonghyuk's restless spirit. Distracted from his reading, Song Jinwoo turned to his curious companion with slight irritation. A dialogue ensued between them about a certain scoundrel whose villainous nature, according to Song Jinwoo, surpassed even Pil-Du's lack of principles. Yoo Jin-ho worriedly inquired about the fate of those they left behind, but Song Jinwoo assured him that everything was under control. The survivors were given clear instructions, no intervention, only rest and observation. Tension hung in the air, making even the most resilient feel uneasy. Suddenly, one of the remaining ones cried out, trying to stop those leaving. With sword in hand and determination in her eyes, she clearly had no intention of standing aside. After some thought, Song Jinwoo made a decision that would change the course of their journey. There was a deep confidence in his gaze that foreshadowed something significant. As they walked, Song Jinwoo made calculations, estimating the time that had passed and the possible consequences. The group approached a gloomy building whose doors hid the unknown. Song Jinwoo's ominous words echoed through the air, predicting Yoo Joonghyuk's imminent death. The building came to life, shrouded in darkness, foreshadowing the mortal danger within. In anticipation of the battle, the hand gripped the hilt of the weapon, ready for action. Step by step, they approached the epicenter of the threat, the darkness thickening around them. Even the walls around seemed to sense the impending catastrophe, trembling with hidden energy. A cold determination burned in Song Jinwoo's eyes, ready to face any threat. The building was consumed by a dark aura, turning it into a portal of nightmares from which few would return. The new companion, previously anxious, now walked alongside, smiling with confidence. She couldn't understand his motives, asking how he knew and why he was so eager to save someone who was doomed. Song Jinwoo merely chuckled, uttering the cynical truth. His actions were dictated by pure pragmatism. Meanwhile, invisible beings from above had already interpreted his actions in their own way, rewarding him for saving a friend mired in vice. He sat in the middle of a ruined world, holding a selfie stick, an odd weapon for the apocalypse, but an indispensable tool for his one eerie talent. Every detail in his memory was worth its weight in gold, every scrap of future events, a trump card, carefully thought out before being played. His companions, Yoo Sang-ah and Lee Gil-young, listened tensely to his words while Jung Hee-won laughed them off, but even she felt the weight of his inexplicable prescience. The world around them was falling apart, and Dokja, looking at the locked door, wondered what would happen when the scenario finally ended. But even with the knowledge, he couldn't afford to risk his existence for an answer, for the stakes were too high and every step a potential trap. As they moved through the gloomy corridors, they came across traces of someone else's rage, torn posters, like a warning of an unknown enemy. Lee Gil-young pointed at them, his childish innocence not hiding his alarm as he asked who could have committed such a barbarity, and Yoo Sang-ah only confirmed his sinister suspicions. An escalator leading to the upper level loomed ahead, and Dokja gave the order, unaware that this ascent was not only physical but also metaphorical. As they stood up, Jung Hee-won and the other woman, sharing their battle experiences, passionately discussed the superiority of swords in this new, cruel world. Their eyes shone with excitement and shared passions, and in this ruined world they found solace in exchanging opinions about faithful blades. He felt a strange pang of guilt for his not-so-bad weapon, especially when Hee-won boasted of a sword that was clearly superior to his modest mastery. Suddenly, Lee Gil-young, offended by the apparent inequality in treatment, demanded an explanation as to why Dokja was so polite to Hee-won but rude to him. This moment of naive resentment was interrupted by a sharp surge of danger, and Gyeon, pointing forward, warned of the approaching threat that his developed instinct sensed. Without a second thought, Jung Hee-won drew her blade, and the name Yoo Joonghyuk pierced the air, filled with a mixture of fear and anticipation. She, a battle priestess, was ready for battle, but the very mention of that name brought alarm to the faces of Dokji's companions, changing the atmosphere. And so, at the top of the escalator, a new group of survivors appeared, uninvited guests, armed and clearly hostile, disrupting the fragile order. Dokja quickly realized that these people who weren't at the station had gotten here by some other means, which created a new, unpredictable variable. Hee-won, her voice filled with worry, confirmed his fears. The scenarios and pace of play were different, and they were facing a challenge entirely different from what they had expected. Dokja thought deeply about the strange mention of prophets that were not in his precognition from ways of survival. He felt a growing sense of unease at how much the events were diverging from his knowledge, as this hidden dungeon should only be known to him and Yoo Joonghyuk. And just as suddenly as it appeared, the light goes out, taking their silhouettes with it, leaving only shimmering pollen. Hee-won and the others panic, their cries merging into a shocked, "What was that?" as Dokja maintains his composure. In the silence after their disappearance, Dokja notices the shredded posters, sensing some hidden meaning. Only one poster remained intact, its caption proclaiming, "An era forgotten by humanity is returning." And Dokja, with a bitter smile, understands that this is the work of Yoo Joonghyuk, his bold, almost provocative message. The next moment, a powerful beam of light engulfs Hee-won, foreshadowing something inexplicable. Then he absorbs Dokja and Yoo Jinho, drawing them into a whirlpool of the unknown. Hee-won, frightened and shocked, tries to comprehend what is happening, while Dokja remains mysteriously calm. As if foreseeing something, Dokja asks her a rhetorical question about her love of cinema, his voice sounding through the distortions of the light. He warns that she may soon come to hate him, and the system's inscription confirms their immersion in the spotlight. Their legs are shrouded in shining particles, harbingers of instantaneous movement, disappearance from familiar reality. The bodies of the satellites dissolve in streams of energy, turning into pure light, disappearing from the cinema. In an instant, their shoes touch the damp, grassy ground, completely different, unfamiliar. Dokja stands with his hands behind his back, his silhouette standing out against the lush, exotic greenery. Around them stretches an impenetrable jungle, majestic and frightening, endless thickets and falling leaves. Hee-won's face contorts with a mixture of fear and confusion as she looks around. Their voices echo in the new reality. Where are we? An unanswered question, lost among the endless crowns of trees. Among the rustling palm trees, motionless as the axis of the world, he stood, not sharing the general confusion. His gaze, penetrating and calm, slid over the faces of his companions, and a barely noticeable smile played at the corners of his lips. While the others were asking what strange film was unfolding before them, he only answered meaningfully, "You'll find out soon enough." But young Guillaume, without waiting for an answer, rushed into the thicket, drawing the anxious glances of his fellow travelers with him. A monstrous insect, a giant praying mantis, hovered directly above him, its eyes glowing an ominous emerald. Hee-won, sword at the ready, shouts a warning, her voice breaking the tense silence. But the next moment, the unthinkable happens. Guillaume, without fear, firmly grabs the predator by the belly. He holds up the Triassic Titanoptera with a shocked look, and Hee-won, stunned, only mutters the question, "What?" A green glow envelopes Guillaume and the captured mantis, as if they find common ground in the chaos. And now the young man smiles at the insect, and it, in turn, obediently bows its head before its new owner. "Fabre," he says, seeing Hee-won's bewilderment, as if this explanation were the answer to all the questions. The companions watched in amazement as Guillaume seemed to have found a new, unusual ally. In response to this, the young man only asks again in bewilderment. His thoughts are probably still occupied with the amazing meeting. But the idyll is shattered. The mantis suddenly recoils, and Guillaume lets out a cry of surprise, as if something had broken their connection. Blood-red eyes blaze with wild fury, and the monster opens its mouth again, ready to devour everything in its path. Smoke and dust shroud the beast's face, highlighting its indomitable power and dispassionate cruelty. The monster looms over two figures frozen in terror, its shadow consuming their hope. The wounded have to be carried, their strength is running out, but there is no turning back. Amidst this madness, Song Jin-woo, sword at the ready, asks his comrade, "Are you going to fight this?" "To proceed further, we must defeat him," he replies, pointing to the central research center visible in the distance. Determination flashes in the hero's eyes, because to win, they need not just a fight, but an incredible, memorable ending. With lightning speed, he rushes forward, his movements sharp and deadly, like a gust of wind, foreshadowing a brutal fight. In the air, blade at the ready, Jinwoo realizes that only he can withstand the onslaught of this primal power. And the monster, a Class 7 Tyrannosaurus Rex, in turn, had already chosen him as its sole target, emitting a deadly aura. Jinwoo is confident that he can hold him off long enough for the others to deliver the finishing blow. But suddenly, contrary to orders, young Gil-young rushes forward, trying to repeat the leader's feat. Jinwoo is horrified, his anger mixed with panic. How dare this child disobey and risk himself? Surrounded by a green glow, Gil-young boldly extends his hand towards the monster, showing his determination. And at that very moment, out of nowhere, a huge praying mantis appears in front of the Tyrannosaurus, a product of a child's imagination that has become reality. The ancient insect strikes with incredible speed, piercing the monster's flesh and sending blood spraying into the air. The Tyrannosaurus roars in pain, its furious cry echoing throughout the forest, shaking the treetops. Even Jinwoo can't hide his surprise at this unexpected turn of events. No wonder Joonghyuk was so eager to get his hands on this child, Jinwoo thought as he assessed Gil-young's potential. At that moment, Jinwoo and his allies resume their attack, striking with redoubled force while the monster is distracted. Swords cut through the air. A golden glow surrounds Jinwoo's blade, turning it into a deadly whirlwind. The unique attribute, unbreakable faith, is activated, imbuing the blade with indomitable strength and determination. The last breath escapes the monster's chest. His gaze dims, foreshadowing the end. With a deafening roar, the giant falls to the ground, shaking the surrounding area. And so, defeated, he lies in the middle of the battlefield, a symbol of a desperate struggle. But the price of victory is high. One of the hunters, mortally wounded, clings to life. Song Jinwoo tries to help, offering water and words of encouragement, but hope fades. Blood streams from his mouth, and the cruel reality whispers his wounds are too deep. The dying man whispers about prophets, leaving Song Jinwoo confused. And suddenly, like a flash, the word flashes through his mind: revelation. Shocked, Song Jinwoo looks at the lifeless body, while an ominous figure looms in the shadows. Revelation, absolutely ridiculous but interesting, a cold voice says as the world loses another life. With a gaze that pierces the veil of the future, she stood like a prophet on the threshold of great mysteries, her eyes shining with a premonition of catastrophe. But here, among the fallen, under a huge leaf that covered a lifeless body, a group of travelers decided to catch their breath, as if time had stood still for a moment. Song Jinwoo's attentive gaze slid over the surrounding greenery, and deep contemplation about the meaning of what was happening could be seen in his eyes. Mysterious elixirs lined up in rows, each vial holding a promise of strength, agility, or endurance, shining in the semi-darkness. And Song Jinwoo, with a sly grin, discovered them all, anticipating unprecedented trophies, as if fate itself was presenting him with gifts. It was time for a brief rest, and even in a world on the brink of collapse, the taste of dinosaur meat became a comfort, almost bringing tears to the eyes. The woman looked around in surprise, admitting that it all felt too unreal, as if the scenario of a well-known film was playing out right in front of her. Song Jinwoo freezes, caught red-handed, his cunning plan exposed by the sudden exclamation. The accusation of greed hung in the air, but he immediately began to justify himself, while another, nimble girl pointed to the hidden figure. With a slight smile, Song Jinwoo looked at the system information, reading the fake characteristics and chuckling at the attempt to deceive him. Thoughts of injustice flashed through his mind. The reluctance to share with someone he felt did not deserve was strong. To resolve the dispute, an old, tried-and-true remedy was proposed, a game of rock-paper-scissors with each round promising one elixir. Suddenly, the silence is broken by the roar of blades, and the helicopter, like a ghostly bird, descends to the ground, raising a whirlwind of dust and leaves around itself. But the world changes again. The floor beneath their feet turns into a mirror-like surface, illuminated by a digital glow, drawing them into the depths of an unreal space. Amidst this digital labyrinth, voices sound anxious, trying to figure out how many more floors separate them from the cherished goal, from the main boss. The Jurassic Park poster, torn down the middle, becomes an ominous sign, indicating that the only way into the film is through the intact image. "We don't know how many films we have left," a worried voice says as Song Jinwoo leads them forward through the gallery of forgotten stories. From the outside, the building is enveloped in a crimson glow, as if the very space around it is writhing in agony, preparing to swallow or spew out something terrible. Looking at the torn Inception poster, they realize that this chapter of their journey is now closed, bringing a fleeting sense of relief. But the next passage catches them unexpectedly, and one of the companions turns pale, pressing her hand to her mouth, struck by seasickness that pierces her to the depths of her soul. The deck of the luxurious ship sways beneath her feet, and the same girl, barely holding back an attack, only moans about her terrible seasickness. Before them, in all its majestic glory, appears a huge liner, gliding over the dark waves, its lights flickering in the night like the promise of unfulfilled hopes. Transformed, they found themselves among high society, in clothes befitting the era, but their faces betrayed confusion, and the swords on their belts indicated readiness for battle. A sudden cry pierces the air. Dawson and Yoo Joonghyuk, shocked, realizes that they have become part of legendary history. There is a man standing right in front of him, his gaze piercing, and he is pointing at Yoo Joonghyuk as if nailing him to a certain role in this drama. "It's him," Yoo Joonghyuk says, recognizing in this man the key character whose fate will now inevitably intertwine with their own. The ship sails across the endless ocean under the cover of the starry sky, its lights reflected in the cold waves, as if foreshadowing the coming catastrophe. And only then do the words reveal the terrible truth. This is a movie where the ship is sinking, and they find themselves trapped on board the doomed Titanic. The bound captive thrashes in silent agony, his screams frozen in his throat. The teen ponders the fate of the captive, realizing that his capture did not produce the expected effect. One of them, Jung Hee-won, proposes a radical solution, citing the bloodthirsty preferences of the master of the stage. While acknowledging the brutal logic, the other doubts, struck by the terrifying realism of what is happening. However, common sense dictates the harsh truth. This is a struggle for survival, where the lives of others are just an element of the plot. Blood sprays everywhere, and a system message confirms the stage master is satisfied with the ending. Having survived the shock, the group realizes a new threat and demands to act quickly, because the danger has not yet passed. The characters' faces flash for a moment, like the credits at the end of a film confirming their role in this drama. Suddenly, the rewards room opens before them, a place where they can perhaps find solace or new opportunities. They walk up the escalator, realizing that the next scene will not be a continuation of their movie. Before them appears a glittering hall filled with countless treasures, props, and awards from past films. They move among the glitter and luxury, understanding the true value of these artifacts. Jeon-hee-won, mesmerized, stops at a display case containing a replica of Mikazuki Munechika's legendary katana. Delighted, she takes the sword in her hands, feeling the perfect balance and weightlessness of the blade, and the system notes her gratitude. The limit on the number of items is a shame, but they continue to search, finding a suitable artifact for everyone, such as a replica of the Shield of Hercules. The question of worthiness arises, for only a select few can lift the hammer, and doubt hangs over those who attempt it. While others struggle with powerful artifacts, Yoo Joonghyuk notices a cute cap, symbolizing ordinariness amidst heroic trials. A simple guy, Yoo Joonghyuk, with genuine childish naivety, reaches for a hammer, causing exclamations of amazement from those around him. And so, contrary to all expectations, he easily lifts the legendary weapon, shrouded in light, causing the world around him to freeze in amazement. In this whirlwind of surprise, the companion asks about his right of ownership, and an unseen voice confirms that the artifact is now his. With childish joy, Yoo Joonghyuk tries on a powerful weapon that radiates a mysterious glow, as if it had always been waiting for its true owner. While others acquire countless treasures, Song Jin-woo, maintaining an unperturbed appearance, ponders his choice, because the main thing is not what to take, but how to use it. His gaze glides over the faces of his companions as he ponders deeply about his next step in this unpredictable world. With a decisive movement, he puts on his combat gloves, as if anticipating the coming trials and preparing for the inevitable fight. Seon Jin-woo holds his shield up, fending off attacks as bloody chaos unfolds around him. "Abandon ship!" echoes the order as the ancient sailing vessel begins to fall apart under the onslaught of enemy strikes. Debris from the deck flies in all directions, and the water keeps rising, threatening to drown them in the middle of the battle. From above, the ship appears to be just a splinter, lost in a raging ocean, engulfed in fire and chaos. Surrounded by debris and acrid smoke, they crouch to the ground, seeking any shelter from the relentless attack. "We're in trouble," Son Jinwoo says gloomily, realizing that they are facing not just a fight, but a battle in the most difficult of all possible scenarios. "How can we win here?" His companion's voice trembles with desperation as she points to the approaching threats. Through the smoke and flames, the outlines of enemy fleets emerge, advancing like a wall on their last citadel. Their ship, already wounded, now finds itself in the center of a giant whirlpool, which slowly but surely pulls it into the abyss. And so they see dozens of the same doomed ships, stuck in ice and whirlwinds, like ghosts of a past battle. "Keep calm," Seong Jinwoo growls, his gaze blazing with determination, because even when outnumbered, when the battle is based on history, there is always a chance of victory. Their gaze is fixed on the distance, where smoke billows above the raging sea and ruined walls, but in their hearts, the last spark of hope smolders. But this hope is shattered by reality. Only one surviving ship is rocking on the waves, while a dozen others seem to have dissolved into nothingness. In this chaos of despair, Yoo Joonghyuk raises the exhausted man, demanding to know where their general is, where is the one who should lead them into battle. Through the groans, a name is heard. General Lee Sun-sin, the name of the legendary warrior whose absence is tantamount to a death sentence. Yoo Joonghyuk feels a wave of bewilderment rising, a premonition of the terrible truth. His eyes widen in shock as realization hits him. Is this their fate? And then he realizes the cruel irony. They must win the legendary Battle of Myeong without their great strategist. Around them, there are only faces distorted with fear, and a young warrior whose soul seems to be already broken, and the blood of his enemies stains the deck. Yoo Joonghyuk grits his teeth, holding back the cry of despair that is bursting out. His will is tempered in this hell. Lee Ji-hee, his voice rings out over the noise of battle, calling to action the one who had hidden in terror. But Lee Ji-hee, even though she holds the sword, turns away, her gaze full of pain and unwillingness to continue this hopeless war. The name of Leo Keiki, governor of Jeolla province, was etched into history as the name of one who fought shoulder to shoulder with Lee Sun-sin, achieving victories even when the admiral found himself in desperate straits. The Constellation couldn't allow the descendant of its comrade to become a monster by killing its best friend. At least that's what the novel had written, and the system confirmed it by opening a new scenario. Yoo Joonghyuk, clutching the shield, couldn't believe his eyes. Lee Sun-sin's stigma? Is it possible to obtain it without a sponsorship contract? Suddenly, the sky was cut by numerous hooks, rushing towards the ship with a piercing whistle. The crew recoiled in horror as metal claws dug into the sides, shaking the ship and causing the warriors to scream in panic. Enemy ships approached through the raging waves, and cries of, "They're coming! Stop them!" echoed across the deck. Yoo Joonghyuk shook her shoulders, demanding that she stand up immediately. "There's no time to explain. Do you just want to die here after killing your friend to survive?" Meanwhile, the battle raged around them. The fighters fought off the advancing enemies, and Yoo Joonghyuk finished the sentence, "But if you stand up now." And these words awakened something in her. Lee Ji-hee stood up, clutching the sword, and Yoo Joonghyuk, standing next to the hammer, knew that her decision could save many lives. A new salvo rang out through the roar of battle. The enemy cannons were spewing fire, breaking through the defenses. Yoo Joonghyuk covered her with his shield, taking on the hail of projectiles, each one shaking him to the very bones. He tensed, gritting his teeth, sweat running down his forehead, but the shield held, deflecting the enemy's blows. But Lee Ji-hee, still kneeling, looked at her shadow, which seemed to be taking on an ominous shape, reminding her of her worst nightmares. She remembered another time, another life, where she and her friend laughed carefree in a cinema, where there were no battles, no shadows, no fear. But Lee Ji-hee, still kneeling, stared at her shadow, which seemed to take on ominous shapes, reminding her of her worst nightmares. She recalled another time, another life, where she and her friend had laughed carefree in a movie theater, where there were no battles, no shadows, no fear. The dark memory faded, giving way to a reality where tears stung her cheeks and a scream caught in her throat, tearing her apart from within. She sobbed, hunched over on the ground, a lonely figure in a world torn apart by chaos, her former carefree life shattered into pieces. But even in this desperate whirlwind of pain, a voice pierced her consciousness, insisting that the responsibility lay with those who survived. He stood over her, his words merciless but true. "If you've been through this, then bear your burden, don't hide." In the whirlwind of battle, where every blow could be the last, he himself felt sharp pain, but he held his shield, repelling furious attacks. The voice continued, leaving her with only two options: to atone for her guilt through struggle or to rot in self-pity, becoming a non-entity. Lee Ji-hee looked up at him, her eyes full of tears, but there was already a glimmer of understanding in them. The past was gone, but the present demanded her attention, her strength. Or maybe she really could change everything, if only she dared to make a choice. His gaze, usually distant, pierced her through, revealing both surprise and hidden encouragement. And in that moment, in her darkest hour of despair, the system acknowledged her growth, revealing to him a new depth to her being. Her fists clenched until the knuckles were white, pounding the ground furiously, every drop of tears turning into a fire of determination. The constellation, sea god of war itself, responded to her awakening will, and she, wiping away her tears, grabbed her blade, ready for battle. Her eyes, still wet, now glowed with unbending determination, showing that help does not always come from outside, sometimes it must be found within oneself. Horror was visible in the sailors' eyes. Everyone understood that this battle could not be won against such elements. Even the most resilient retreated in the face of this madness, trying to stay afloat. But suddenly, through the fury of the waves, something else appeared, a glowing blue banner emanating invisible energy. And the water, obeying his unspoken call, began to take on the outlines of a complex, shimmering structure. Entire ships found themselves inside this strange crystalline cage, as if trapped in a light. On board one of the ships, Baek Miho and her companions watched this incredible spectacle in amazement. Song Suho, trying to remain calm, encouraged his men, but there was a question in his eyes as well. And there, in the midst of this chaos, shrouded in a mystical blue glow, stood she, a girl with a determined look. Her eyes, full of barely restrained sadness, reflected the full weight of the coming battle and the decision made. It was Baek Miho, and behind her stood the ghostly image of the legendary warrior whose will merged with hers.